You found it, didn't you? The nurse said quietly. And you still brought it here. Olivia didn't answer right away. She just set the envelope on the counter and pushed it forward with 2 fingers, like she was afraid if she held it any longer, she might change her mind. Please make sure he gets what belongs to him. Then she walked back out into the rain. 19 years old, no coat, no money, nowhere to go. 18,000 she had just given away. Before we go any further, if this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from to see how far this story travels. The diner had been closed for 3 years. Bennett knew every inch of it, every crack in the vinyl booth cushions, every water stain on the ceiling tiles, every place where the floor groaned if you stepped wrong at night. She'd been sleeping in the back. She had been sleeping in the back storeroom for 6 weeks, tucked behind a broken shelf unit and a stack of industrial-sized tomato cans that had never been thrown out. She kept a battery-powered lantern she'd found in a dumpster behind the hardware store on Route 11. And she rationed the batteries the way other people ration money, because for Olivia, light was money. Light was the difference between reading the bus schedule she'd found and sleeping through the one morning transfer that might get her somewhere warmer before winter finished arriving. She was 19 years old, and she had learned that survival was mostly about arithmetic. Granola bars in her bag. One could go tonight, one tomorrow morning. The gas station on the corner threw out the day-old hot dogs at 9:15 if the night clerk was running behind, and he usually was. Church on Maple that did a Wednesday lunch, everyone. No questions asked, everyone. And today was Tuesday, everyone, so she had to make the granola bars work. The jacket had a hole in the left elbow, and the zipper pull had snapped off 2 weeks ago, so she held it closed with a binder clip she'd found on the sidewalk. She had a spare shirt, everyone, an extra pair of socks, her mother's photograph, the library card she kept in her front pocket, even though she hadn't been inside a library in 4 months, because she was too afraid once someone would notice she smelled wrong. The worst part. Not the cold, not the hunger. The constant fear that someone would look at her and immediately know, everyone, and then she would have to watch their face go through the whole performance, pity first, then discomfort, then the careful stepping away. When she had stopped being angry about it, anger took too much energy. What she had instead was a system. Wake before 6. Any signs she'd been there. Walk the 2 miles into the nearest commercial strip before the morning traffic got thick enough that people noticed a girl walking alone with a backpack. Any work, boosting, table, reduce, dishwashing, raking, leaf raking, whatever someone would pay her to do off the books. Be invisible. Be useful. Be gone before anyone felt obligated to ask questions. She'd been doing this for 8 months. She had been doing this for 8 months since the last of her foster placements had collapsed in the particular ugly way that placements collapsed, not with a dramatic confrontation, with a quiet administrative decision and a social worker who was genuinely sorry, but had 17 other cases and couldn't make the numbers work. Olivia had understood. She had even said so. She'd said, it's okay to understand. Zonderson, and she'd meant it. It was maybe the saddest part. He had come looking for her. After that, she had been certain for the first 2 weeks that someone would. The third week, she had understood that certainty was a luxury she couldn't afford either. The motel was 3/10 of a mile from the diner, which Olivia knew because she had paced it once, counting steps the way she cataloged distances between all the places that mattered in her small geography. The motel was called the Ridgeline Rest, and it had 14 rooms arranged in an L shape around a cracked asphalt lot. It's the kind of motel that mostly survived on the trade from long-haul truckers and traveling salespeople, the kind of people who needed a bed and a shower and no conversation, who paid cash when they could and left before checkout technically required. Walsh had owned it for 11 years. Olivia had worked for him exactly twice. Once washing lessons, when his regular laundry service had canceled last minute. Once clearing rooms on a Saturday when he was short-staffed. Paid her cash both times, less than he said he would. And both times she had accepted it without argument because was in no position to argue, and he knew it. He had the particular instinct of a certain kind of man who could identify powerlessness the way a dog identifies fear immediately, accurately, and with an awareness of exactly what it meant for him. He had called her again 2 days ago. More rooms needed turning over. Had said yes. She was in the middle of her third room of the afternoon, stripping the sheets from the second bed, the TV on low in the corner, because Gregory let the cleaning staff keep it on, and it was the closest thing to company she got during working hours when the motorcycles came in, before she saw them. She heard them before she saw them. The sound built from the edge of audibility to something physical, a vibration in the floor tiles and the window glass and somewhere behind her sternum. Then she crossed to the window and watched 12 motorcycles pull into the Ridgeline Rests parking lot with the particular ordered precision of people who had been riding together long enough that formation was instinct, not the motorcycles of men having a midlife crisis on a weekend trip. These were road-worn machines, ridden by men whose road-worn quality matched them heavy jackets with patches she recognized even from a distance, silver hair under helmets, the kind of faces that had forgotten how to perform anything. One man in particular caught her attention, not because he was the largest or the loudest, but because he was the only one who moved slowly. He swung off his bike with the careful deliberateness of someone who had learned that his body required negotiation now, where once it had simply obeyed. He was maybe 60, maybe older. His hair was gray-white, pulled back. His face had the texture of old leather left in the sun too long. He stood beside his motorcycle for a moment after dismounting, one hand on the seat, and even from her window, Olivia could see that the pause wasn't casual. It was the pause of a man steadying himself, deciding whether his legs were going to cooperate. They did. He straightened. He followed the others toward the check-in. She went back to the sheets. The name on the register was Walter Hayes. Gregory mentioned it later, not because he cared, but because he was the kind of man who cataloged names the way he cataloged all information as potential leverage. He said, Stone, they call him. Some kind of elder in the organization, I guess. Rooms for 2 nights. Cash up front. He'd said it with the particular satisfaction of a man counting money before it was quite in his hand, when Olivia had just nodded and taken her cleaning cart to the next room. She didn't think about Walter Hayes again until 11:47 that night. Isn't supposed to be at the motel that late. Her arrangement with Gregory was day hours. Only she cleaned rooms during checkout turnover and left by 5. But the storeroom at the diner had started getting water through the east wall with the afternoon's rain, and her sleeping spot was soaked, and she'd come back to the motel's rear stairwell because it was covered and partially sheltered, and Gregory had never explicitly told her not to use it after hours, which was the kind of loophole Olivia's whole existence depended on. Then she was eating her second granola bar, her back against the concrete wall, listening to the rain hit the overhang, when she heard the sound from room 7. It was not a loud sound. It was actually very quiet, which was what made it wrong. Hard impact, a single syllable that might have been a word or might have been a breath forced out by something happening to a body. Then nothing. No movement sounds, no TV, no voice. Sat still for 3 seconds. Then she stood up, went to the door of room 7, and knocked. She knocked again harder. Sir, are you okay in there? Nothing. She tried the handle, locked. She went to the front desk. The night clerk was a teenager named Marcus, who went to the high school 2 miles down the road and worked the overnight shift because his family needed the money and he was saving for a car. Playing a game on his phone when Olivia came in from the rain, and he looked up with the expression of someone who has learned not to be surprised by things happening at odd hours. 7, Olivia said. Walter Hayes, I think something's wrong. You're not on shift. I know. Room 7. Open it. I can't just open a guest's room. She leaned forward on the counter and looked at him with the focused calm of someone who had spent months making hard decisions quickly. Something. He's an older man. He was moving slow earlier. In the room or call. 911 yourself, but do one or the other right now. Stared at her for another 2 seconds, then grabbed the master key. Walter Stone Hayes was on the floor beside the bed, conscious, which was the first thing Olivia checked. His eyes were open, tracking, following her when she moved. His breathing was wrong, shallow and irregular, with a quality to it that made her think of her grandmother in the last weeks. A sound that had nothing to do with sleep. Color was bad. His left hand was pressed to his chest. "Can you hear me?" she said, kneeling beside him. "Yes." The word came out carefully, like he was testing whether it worked. "Don't make a fuss." "Sir, I'm going to need you to let me make a fuss. You having pain in your chest?" He looked at her, moved in his expression that wasn't quite irritation and wasn't quite amusement. "I work here. I'm calling 911. I don't. And you don't want me to. I'm doing it anyway." She already had her phone out. She only had a prepaid phone with 17 minutes of talk time left on it. There'd been 4 of them, and she used 4 of them on the 911 call. She didn't think about the 13 minutes she had left, or when she might be able to afford more, because there was a man on the floor, and that was the only math that mattered right now. The dispatcher's voice was professional and calm and told her to stay on the line, and she did. Stood in the doorway, looking pale. Olivia sat on the floor next to Walter Hayes and watched his face and talked to him the way the dispatcher had told her to, steady and unhurried, keeping his attention on her voice. "What's your name?" he asked. At one point, his voice rough. "Olivia," he said it like he was filing it. Very calm, for a pause, a careful breath. "For someone who doesn't know me." "People are people," she said. His eyes stayed on her face. "Your parents." She kept her expression even. Feeling. "Still with me. Still with you." Another careful breath. She didn't answer that one. Instead, she said, "I need you to stay awake for me. Something. Tell me about the bike, the one you rode in on." "About them. Tell me about that." And Walter Hayes, lying on the floor of a motel room in Knoxville, Tennessee, with something's happening to his heart, started talking about a 1987 Heritage Softail he'd had for 22 years, and his voice steadied as he talked. The color got marginally less frightening, and Olivia sat on the floor beside him and listened like she had nowhere else in the world to be. It arrived in 8 minutes. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. Olivia stayed out of the way while the paramedics worked, answered the questions they asked her accurately and concisely, and watched them wheel Walter Hayes out of the room on a gurney. His head when he went past her. He said something. She didn't quite catch it. Sounded like "thank you," but she couldn't be certain. He was gone. Then, sans. Marcus looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite name. "Did you know?" he said. "I heard something, but you were outside." "I heard something," she said again. He handed him the master key she'd gotten. She was still holding. "Tell Gregory I was here." He nodded slowly. In his face, said he wanted to ask more. He didn't ask. He went back to the stairwell, pulled her knees to her chest, and listened to the rain, and waited for her heartbeat to return to normal. Walsh arrived at the motel at 6:40 the next morning, earlier than usual, which was the first sign that the previous night had already reached him. He came in sharp, the particular sharp of a man who has gotten unexpected news about his property and is processing it as primarily a liability question rather than a human event. He did not ask about Walter Hayes first. He asked about the paramedic report and whether there had been any damage to room 7. Then he asked who had been at the motel when it happened. He told him. Gregory found Olivia at 7:15 in room 4, starting on the morning's first checkout turnover. He stood in the doorway and watched her fold a towel before he said anything. "You were here last night," he said. She kept folding, sheltered from the rain. The stairwell, after hours. They didn't go into any rooms, except room 7. She put the towel down and looked at him. "I heard someone fall," the night clerk, and had him open the door. "I called 911. Man had a cardiac event." Gregory's face went through a brief private calculation. He said, "Right, that was the right thing to do." He said it like someone reading from a script about the right thing to do. Appreciate that. Another beat. Shay Stone, he's stable, apparently. Got him at UT Medical. Olivia nodded. Good. She went back to the towels. Gregory didn't leave. She could feel him in the doorway. The weight of something he was building toward. Good work yesterday, he said. And last night, keeping a cool head. Thank you. I pay a fair rate. She said nothing. The thing is, he said, Zamper one with the particular tone of a man arriving at the thing he'd actually come to say. We've got a situation. The room. Room 7. He paused. I need to clean it out and turn it over before his club friends start asking to access it. Procedure. Guest belongings get inventoried and stored. Straightened up slowly and looked at him. All right, I'd like you to do it. Given that you're already here, already familiar with the situation. His eyes were very steady. You understand that whatever you find in that room stays between you and me. That's how it works. That's been how it works here for a long time. She understood him immediately. She had always been able to do that, read the subtext under words the way other people read words themselves. He wasn't talking about standard checkout procedure. He was telling her that if she found anything in that room, it became his. And I understand, she said. Then he nodded, looking satisfied. And she watched him walk away and thought, understand. Son, I didn't agree. Room 7 had the particular quality of a space recently vacated in the direction of emergency, the bed disturbed. Items knocked sideways on the nightstand, the lamp cord slightly displaced from where the paramedics had moved around it. He worked methodically, the way she worked everything, moving through the room in sections. She found the envelope under the mattress, not hidden elaborately, not taped to the box spring or sealed inside a pillowcase, just slid between the mattress and the box spring. People hide things when they don't have a better option available, and they need to sleep somewhere, and they trust to the general invisibility of the hidden thing more than to any particular sophistication of its concealment. Was a standard white business envelope, not sealed, the flap just folded over. She could feel the weight of it before she opened it. She counted it twice, because the first count seemed wrong. $18,000. She stood in the middle of room 7, holding $18,000, and her mind went, briefly, completely quiet. The second thing that happened after the silence was the arithmetic. Not the moral arithmetic, the literal kind. An apartment in the lower end of Knoxville's market was around $600 a month. $18,000 was 2.5 years of rent, less. Gone once, which was enough time to get a real job, a documented one, U2 situation, with a real address she could put on an application. Enough to eat for 2.5 years without rationing granola bars. Enough to buy a coat with a working zipper. The third thing that happened was that she thought about the man on the floor, the way he'd talked about the motorcycle to keep himself calm. The way he'd tracked her face with his eyes, because her face was the only stable thing in his immediate experience. She stood in the middle of room 7 for approximately 4 minutes. Then she folded the envelope flap closed, put it in the inside pocket of her jacket, and finished cleaning the room. She was loading the cleaning cart in the hallway when Gregory reappeared. But first, he had the look of a man who had been waiting, not impatiently, but with the particular position quality of someone who has placed himself strategically. 7 clear? He said. Clear, she said. He watched her face. The question landed with precision, and she recognized its precision. He'd asked it exactly that way, because there was no graceful lie available for no if the answer was yes, and he wanted to see if she would try. He looked at him directly. The patient's belongings are in the bag. Wallet, phone, keys, a couple of personal items. Put them in the lost and found bag, the way the checklist says. Gregory's eyes moved to the cart, then back to her. That's what was there. A silence. He was very still. She had the distinct sense of a man running probability calculations, weighing whether she was lying against what he knew about people who were in her position, which was that people in her position generally didn't lie, because they couldn't afford the consequences of being caught. He was wrong about that, but she understood why he thought it. He said finally, I'll take the lost and found bag. Bring it to the front when I'm done with the cart. Another beat. Then he nodded and walked away, pushed the cart to the supply room, locked it in, and went to find Marcus. He was alone at the desk, eating a granola bar from the vending machine. He looked up when she came in. I need to ask you something, she said quietly. And he nodded. The man from last night's stone, do you know which hospital they took him to? UT Medical Center. I heard the paramedics call it in. She paused. If Gregory asks you what we talked about, tell him I asked if there was any more work this week. Just looked at her for a long moment. He was 17, and he was not stupid, and something in his face said he had understood more than she had said. He said, Gregory caught her before she reached the exit. He'd been watching. She realized had stationed himself somewhere he could see the door from. He came up behind her. He came up behind her with a particular quality of someone who has allowed another person to make their decisions and is now prepared to respond to it. He said. She stopped, turned. He looked at her with an expression that had reorganized itself into something almost friendly, almost paternal. I want to talk to you for a minute, he said, not as an employer, just as someone who's seen a lot of life. Touché. She said nothing. She'd learned that nothing was usually the right answer with men who prefaced things by explaining they were speaking to you as something other than what they were. In a hard situation, he said, no permanent address. Family. Working off the books, he tilted his head slightly. It's a vulnerable position to be in. And I think you're smart enough to know that the world doesn't tend to reward people for doing the hard right thing. It rewards them for being practical. I hear what you're saying, she said. You found something in room 7. He said, plainly, once, Enthikin. I think you know it's not yours, and you're trying to figure out what to do with that. I want to offer you a third option. She waited. %, he said. $7,200. You give me the envelope, I take the rest. Nobody knows anything. Hayes is in the hospital, he's sick. His family's complicated. There's no guarantee that money comes back to anybody it was meant for. This way you get a clean start and it doesn't disappear into the system somewhere. It was a good speech, structured carefully. Discipline, inobedico, hitting all the places where a person in position might be weak, the uncertainty about the money's destination. The practical appeal, he went. The framing of her as someone making a smart choice rather than a dishonest one. Tick. She could see the work that had gone into it, and she gave it credit for that. She said, who has Stone's phone? His expression flickered just slightly, just briefly. His phone, from the lost and found bag. I need to borrow it for 5 minutes. He stopped, recalibrated. Why? Because I want to call his family, she said. Whoever is listed in his emergency contacts. I want to let them know he's at UT Medical. Stared at her. Something moved in his face that wasn't calculation anymore. Something older and uglier. The recognition of a person who cannot be leveraged and the specific dislike that produces in someone who depends on leverage. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. I probably make mistakes all the time, she said. Isn't one of them. You have no money. You have nowhere to sleep. You have no one in this city who knows your name. He stepped closer, not threatening exactly, but occupying space in a way that was meant to communicate what threatening felt like. You need me more than you need to feel righteous. Don't feel righteous, she said. I feel clear. She stepped to the side, creating space. The lost and found bag, Gregory. Can I see Stone's phone or not? His jaw tightened. The bag goes to the hospital with his other belongings. Procedure. Great, she said. Then I'll go to the hospital. He walked past him. He said her name again. She didn't stop. Him say, behind her, you come back here and you're not employed anymore. Understand that? You think about what that means. She thought about what it meant. She thought about it for the 3 steps it took to reach the exit door. Then she pushed through it into the rain. Not improved since the night before. It's the kind of persistent November rain that didn't commit to being dramatic, just maintained itself at a steady, cheerless level that made everything slightly colder and wetter than it would have been otherwise. Walked with her jacket out held closed with both hands, when she didn't need them for balance, the envelope in the inside pocket where it stayed dry against her body heat. She had 4 miles to walk. She knew the route. She'd looked up UT Medical Center on the library computer 2 months ago when she'd sprained her wrist and been trying to decide if it was worth going to the emergency room. She hadn't gone. The wrist had healed on its own. She walked. This mile was the commercial strip gas stations, fast food, a used car lot with a string of flags that whipped and snapped in the rain. She kept her head down and her pace even. A car slowed beside her briefly, someone deciding whether to offer her a ride or just observing, then accelerated away. The second mile cut through a residential neighborhood, houses that did them, some of them well-maintained and some of them not, trees, dropping wet leaves across the sidewalk. She passed a woman walking a dog in a yellow raincoat. The woman looked at her with the reflexive concern of someone registering a young person in bad weather, but the dog pulled toward a hedge and the moment passed. Trees and Monzo. She thought about the money. She had been trying not to think about it specifically, but she still let herself now walking through the rain with 4 miles between her and where she was going. She thought about it the way she would have thought about a math problem, not emotionally, just factually. $18,000. Someone had earned it or saved it or been given it, and then they had put it under a mattress because they were sleeping somewhere unfamiliar. And that was where you put things you didn't want taken. They hadn't hidden it from an enemy. They'd hidden it from the generalized insecurity of sleeping somewhere that wasn't home. He understood that impulse at a level that most people didn't get to understand. When the money wasn't hers, that was the fact. She hadn't earned it, been given it. She had found it by accident while doing work she was paid to do. And the fact that she needed it more than almost anyone else she could imagine didn't alter its ownership. She knew Gregory would say that was naive. He would say that the world didn't operate on deserving and ownership. It operated on possession and power. And she had the possession, and he was pointing out that power could be realigned. FSA. The thing she hadn't told Gregory hadn't told anyone, because she didn't tend to say out loud the things that mattered most to her, was that she had spent 8 months being the person that the world could do anything to. Family. Address. No discipline. No phone with minutes. Then no one who would come looking. Then invisible and movable and exploitable, and the world had treated her accordingly, and she had survived it. Survival at the cost of becoming Gregory Walsh was not survival. Just a different kind of disappearing. She knew who she was when nobody was watching. It was going to stay that way. She was on the 3rd mile crossing a bridge over a narrow creek, running fast and brown with the rain when she heard the motorcycle coming up behind her, slowing. She tensed without turning her system, for assessing threat was well developed and fast. And she ran the calculation automatically. Deck. Single bike, slowing but not stopped, date, and public enough to be relatively low risk. She kept walking. The motorcycle paced her for 10 seconds. Then the rider said, "Hey." She turned. He was maybe 28, with a row-cut face and a jacket whose patches she recognized from the previous night's convoy. He was looking at her with an expression that was working very hard to be neutral. "The girl from the motel," he said. "Marcus told me you'd be walking." She stopped. "Marcus told you?" "Marcus told Carver." "Carver told me." "Danny." He said it without ceremony, like it explained something. "Stone's asking about you." "Stone is awake?" "Has been since this morning. Let the nurses do much until he knows what happened to the girl who stayed with him." A pause. "You going to the hospital?" "Yes." "Then get on." Soaked. She looked at him. He looked back at her. He had the quality of someone who was trying to behave correctly and was slightly uncertain about what correctly looked like in this specific situation. "Fine walking," she said. "You're 3.5 miles out in the rain carrying a backpack," Danny said. "Would look. Just get on, please," he's asking. She considered it for 3 seconds. The envelope pressed against her ribs. "Something for him," she said. "Something I found in the room." Danny's expression didn't change. "Okay? I'm telling you because I don't want there to be confusion about why I'm going," he said again in the same tone. He was, she thought, someone who had learned to deal with complicated situations by saying simple things and waiting. She got on the motorcycle. The ride to UT Medical was 8 minutes. None of them said anything. The rain came at them sideways, and she held the envelope against her body with one hand and held the grab bar with the other and thought about absolutely nothing for the length of those 8 minutes, which was the closest thing to peace she had felt in a while. Hospital had the specific sensory quality of all hospitals, the coolness and the particular chemicals smell that wasn't quite clean and wasn't quite anything else, the sound of overhead pages, the quality of waiting. Danny brought her to the third floor without consulting anyone at the desk, which told her he had been there for a while and had established his relationship with the geography. He stopped outside room 318. He's been asking since he woke up, Danny said quietly, about himself, about who found him. Why, she said. Danny looked at her like the question surprised him slightly. Because someone found him and got help and stayed, he said. She stood outside the room. The envelope was in her hand. She had taken it out of her jacket during the elevator ride, the way you prepared yourself before doing something difficult. Then she pushed the door open. Walter Hayes was awake, propped up, as in monitored, attached to things, and visibly reduced by all of it in the specific way that strong people are reduced by medical apparatus not defeated, rerouted into unfamiliar dependency. He looked worse than he had on the floor of the motel room, and also somehow better because he was in a bed instead of a floor, and someone was monitoring the thing his heart was doing. He looked at her when she came in. Olivia, he said. He was surprised he remembered. She didn't say so. She walked to the side of the bed and put the envelope on the blanket beside his hand. In your room, she said, under the mattress. I wanted to make sure you got it back. Walter Hayes looked at the envelope. He looked at her hand, putting it down. He looked at her face. Then he picked it up and looked inside it and put it back down. He was quiet for a long time. You walked here, he said. You got a ride eventually. From whom? Danny. Something moved in his expression. Agree Walsh see you leave with this? She paused. He didn't see me leave with anything. But he knew about the money. It wasn't quite a question. She looked at him, at the steadiness of his gaze, and understood that he was considerably more alert than his position might suggest. 40% to keep quiet, she said. I said no. Walter Hayes looked at her for a long, still moment. How old are you? He said. 19. Where are you sleeping tonight? He hadn't planned to answer that question. She opened her mouth to say something deflecting, something that moved them past it. I'll figure it out, she said. Walter Hayes reached out and put his hand over the envelope on the blanket beside him, taking it, not pushing it toward her, just placing his hand on it, like grounding himself. He said quietly, you won't have to, everyone. And the way he said it, not with pity, not with performance, but the flat quality of a man who had made decisions. Decisions made her understand that something had just shifted. She just didn't know yet what it had shifted into. She stood in room 318 of UT Medical Center. He went, soaking wet. It's 19 years old, entire life in a backpack on her back. And Walter Stone Hayes held her gaze with the focus of a man who had seen everything and was still capable of being surprised. The heart monitor continued its work. The rain kept falling outside the window, and something that had no name yet was just beginning. She had expected him to thank her and let her go. Script she had written in her head on the walk over, deliver the envelope, confirm it reached its owner, and slip back out into the rain the way she slipped out of every situation that threatened to become too large for her to manage. She had spent 8 months perfecting the exit. She was very good at it. Hayes was not cooperating with her script. He hadn't moved his hand from the envelope. He was still watching her with that focused, unreadable quality, the kind of attention that didn't feel like inspection so much as recognition. Like he was looking at something he understood, but hadn't expected to find here, in this room, wearing a wet jacket held closed with a binder clip. He said, it wasn't a request, exactly. It wasn't a command either. It occupied some third register that she associated with people who were used to being listened to without having to perform authority. She sat in the chair beside the bed. "Tell me about Gregory Walsh," he said. "There's not much to tell. You walk through a rainstorm rather than take his money." Stone said. "It means there's plenty to tell. Start wherever you want." He looked at her hands. They were still damp, her knuckles reddened from the cold. He thought about what to say and what not to say, and then decided that he had earned a straight answer, if anyone had. "He's been running the motel for years," she said. "He hires people who can't say no, people who need the cash, and won't complain if he pays them less than he said, or changes the terms after the work is done. I've worked for him twice before today." She paused. "Times he shorted me." Stone was quiet. "He knew I found the envelope," she said. "He guessed it. He came to me with a split 40% for me, 60 for him. Nobody says anything. He said Stone Hayes was sick, said there was no guarantee the money would get to who it was meant for anyway. He made it sound like the practical choice. He's had practice with that speech," Stone said. He looked up. "You know about him?" "I know the type." His jaw tightened slightly. "Pulled into that lot because it was the nearest place with 12 rooms. Do any research on Gregory Walsh?" A pause, a careful breath. "You're doing some now." Something in his voice changed on that last sentence, and Olivia filed it without comment. She had learned to catalog the particular quality of a man saying a thing and meaning more by it than the words themselves contained. "He said he'd fire me," she said, "when I walked out. He said to think about what that meant." "What does it mean?" She met his eyes. "It means I need to find work somewhere else, which is what I've been doing since I was 17. So," she said it lightly, not performing toughness, but genuinely meaning it. "I'll figure it out." Stone looked at her for a moment that stretched past comfortable. Then he said, "Danny." The door, which had been slightly ajar, opened fully. He leaned in. "Yeah, get Carver." Danny disappeared. Stone turned back to Olivia. "Are you hungry?" The question landed in an unguarded moment, and her face did something involuntary. Before she could stop it, a brief fractional drop in her careful neutral expression that lasted maybe half a second. He covered it. But Stone had seen it. "I'm fine," she said. "Isn't what I asked." A silence. "I had a granola bar this morning," she said. Pretend. Stone looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he looked back at her, and his expression had changed in a way she couldn't fully name, something harder and quieter underneath the previous steadiness. He said, "Here's what's going to happen right now. You're going to stay in this room. Danny is going to bring you food from the cafeteria downstairs. You're going to eat it. And then we're going to talk. You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." His voice hadn't risen, but it had acquired a kind of finality. "You sat on a floor in a motel room and talked me through a cardiac event. You found $18,000 that you needed. And I think we both understand exactly how much you needed it, and you carried it 4 miles in the rain to give it back. You can let someone buy you a sandwich." She opened her mouth. He said, "It's not charity, it's a meal. Don't make it something complicated." She closed her mouth. The food arrived 20 minutes later, not just a sandwich, but a real cafeteria tray. The kind of institutional plenty that she had stopped being able to afford. Hot soup, a sandwich, an orange, coffee, corn. Danny set it on the rolling table and pushed it toward her without ceremony. And she ate with the focused attention of someone who was not going to let pride get between her and hot food. Stone watched her eat without making it a thing he was watching. He asked her questions, low and conversational, and she answered between bites. And by the time the tray was mostly clear, she had told him more about the last 8 months than she had told anyone, including, especially herself. Foster care, the aging out, the temporary jobs, the diner storeroom, the arithmetic of granola bars and library computers and bus schedules. She didn't tell it as a tragedy. She told it the way she experienced it, as logistics. Solution, next problem when she finished. Stone was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How long have you been alone?" "Since I was 16. My mother was the last. She got sick, and the placement situation after that didn't." She stopped. "It's been about 3 years." "3 years?" "Yes." Another quiet. The heart monitor continued its steady narrative. Down the hall, someone laughed. The ordinary sound of a hospital in the middle of its day. "He came looking for you," Stone said. "It wasn't a question." "That bothers me," he said. "You don't have to be bothered on my behalf." "You're not doing it on your behalf," he said. "I'm doing it on the behalf of what it says about the world that a 19-year-old girl sleeps behind a diner and nobody comes looking." He paused. "It's a problem with the world." She looked at her hands again. It was warm. The coffee was warm in a paper cup, and she held it with both hands, and she could feel the warmth all the way through. "It's going to happen with Gregory Walsh," she said. Stone's expression moved. "Why?" "Because there are other people he's doing this to." "Just me." She looked up. "There was a woman last month. I talked to her once. She was washing rooms. She had 2 kids at home, and he was paying her in cash and then cutting the amount and telling her the work wasn't good enough. She needed the job more than she needed to argue. So she took it." A pause. "Others. I've seen it." Stone was watching her very carefully now. "You're telling me this because you want me to do something about it," he said. "I'm telling you this because you asked what you could be bothered about," she said. "It's worth being bothered about." The room was quiet. Stone said, "Yeah, it is." The man named Carver arrived 40 minutes later. It was not what Olivia had expected, though she realized she hadn't formed a specific expectation. Large in the way that suggested former physical labor rather than deliberate cultivation, with face that was not unkind but was very much accustomed to making assessments quickly. He looked at Olivia the way she imagined. Someone looked at a piece of equipment they were evaluating for a specific purpose, not dismissively, but precisely. "Stone," he said, by way of greeting, everyone, pulling a chair to the other side of the bed. "This is Olivia." Carver looked at her. "You're the one who found him." "The one who called 911, she said. "Finding him was accidental." Something shifted in Carver's expression that might have been the early stages of approval. He said, "She also found my money and returned it," and turned down a cut from Gregory Walsh. Carver looked at the envelope on the blanket and back at Olivia. "How much did he offer you?" $7,200. "You said no." "I said no." Carver was quiet for a moment. "Why?" She had been asked this, essentially by Stone, by the general pressure of the situation. Gregory himself gave the same answer she would have given any of them, "Because it wasn't mine." He looked at Stone. Stone said, "I want to know everything about Gregory Walsh. I want to know who else he's been doing this to." "Make some calls," Carver said. "Do that?" And Stone paused, looked at Olivia. "What's the situation with a place to stay tonight?" His eyes came back to her. She felt particular discomfort of being the subject of practical discussion that concerned her own vulnerability. "But," she said, which was true only in the most technical sense, the diner storeroom was still there, one east wall leak and all. Stone said, "Carver, I'll handle it," Carver said. "You don't have to." She started. "Olivia." Stone said her name with a kind of weighted simplicity. "You returned my money. You have every right to refuse what I'm offering. You're going to keep offering it until it stops making sense to, so you might as well let me get it out." He paused. The rental property on the east side of the city had been sitting empty for 2 months waiting on repairs. Repairs are mostly done. There are 3 rooms and a working heater. Cousin manages it. I can't afford. I didn't say anything about money. She looked at him. "I'm not looking for charity. I know you're not." His voice was steady and unhurried. "You're not offering charity. I'm offering shelter to a 19-year-old who did an honest thing in a situation where nobody would have blamed her for the other choice." He held her gaze. "You know, there's a difference," he said. It's on. She did know. She also knew that knowing the difference didn't make accepting easier, because the architecture of her last 3 years had been built on the rule that accepting things from people meant owing them something. And owing people things in her position was dangerous. Reading this, Stone said, "You don't owe me anything, even gratitude. The money was mine, and you gave it back, starting from zero." A long silence. "1 month," she said finally. "When I'll find work, find my own place, and I'll be out in a month." It's fine, Stone said. Carver stood. I'll call Danny. He looked at Olivia with that same assessing directness. Anything with you? She touched the strap of her backpack. Everything I own. Something moved in Carver's face, not pity. She was grateful to recognize. Something closer to respect, and she thought that was a different thing entirely. Lee left. The door swung partly closed behind him. Stone said, the 18,000. Then she looked at him. I want you to know what it was, he said. That it changes anything you did. But I want you to know. He looked at the envelope. For a kid. A young woman, actually. 22. Bins. And went still. She's been in some trouble. The kind of trouble you get into when nobody was watching you carefully enough when you were younger, and she's trying to get clear of it. Bringing her money to start over somewhere new where the situation didn't follow her. A beat. She's not my daughter. Just someone who needed the kind of help I was in a position to give. Olivia said nothing for a moment. Then she said, is she okay? Stone almost smiled. It was a small movement, quickly contained, but she saw it. Made a phone call this morning. She knows the money is safe. He looked at her, partly because of you. She looked out the window, eased to something more intermittent, coming in gusts rather than steady sheets. How long has this been happening? She said. Gregory Walsh and the workers. We'll find out. He's good at finding out. Stone shifted in the bed, settling himself more upright. What you said about the woman with the 2 kids. Remember anything specific? Name? Details? Her name was Karen, I think. Or Karen. She had a blue Corolla with a cracked taillight. She mentioned a daughter in 2nd grade. She paused. He came back to work the week after he cut her pay. She needed the job. Okay. He was quiet, processing. Are there others you talked to? I didn't talk to many people. I tried not to draw attention. A pause. I saw. There was a guy, maybe 40, did maintenance work. He'd been there for 2 years. And I heard Gregory tell him his rate had changed. That business was slow. And didn't argue, just nodded and went back to what he was doing. She stopped. I thought about saying something to him. I didn't. She was honest, because I couldn't afford to be involved in anything. Gregory decided I was a problem. I had no backup. He wanted to call. It was risk I couldn't take. She met Stone's eyes. And I'm not proud of that. You were surviving, he said. Stone was quiet for a moment. That's true, he said finally. And it's also true that you're here now. He came back at 3:15 with a paper bag from somewhere that smelled like actual food, not cafeteria food, real food, a restaurant somewhere, and set it on the foot of the bed without announcing it. He looked at Olivia. The place has heat, he said. Taking shower. I checked. She said, thank you. Thank me. Stone will get weird about it. He pulled a key from his jacket pocket and set it on the arm of her chair. This is on the tag. It's a 15-minute bus ride from here. Or I can. Take the bus, she said. He nodded. He seemed about to say something else, stopped. Everyone. Then said it anyway. Told me what you said to Gregory about walking out. A beat. He said you didn't even hesitate. I hesitated, she said. I hesitated for about 4 minutes alone in that room. And he looked at her. What made you decide? She thought about it. He thought about who I'd be if I took it, she said. And I didn't like that person. Danny was quiet for a moment. He said, it is, which seemed, coming from him, like a considerable statement. Stone's eyes were closed. Whether sleeping or resting, she couldn't tell. Breathing had evened out into something steadier than it had been that morning. The monitor continued its work. She stood to go. She paused at the door. Stone, she said quietly. Not sure if he was awake, he said, without opening his eyes. Thank you, she said, for the room, and for not making it a bigger thing than it is. Opened his eyes then. He looked at her from across the room with that focused, unreadable steadiness that she was beginning to understand was simply how he saw things clearly without decoration. And you did, he said, is a bigger thing than you're making it. I want you to know that. She didn't answer. She wasn't sure she had an answer. She lifted her hand in a small, awkward wave on that she immediately felt embarrassed about and pushed through the door into the hallway. He heard him say very quietly as the door swung closed, get some sleep. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building on Alcott Street. his cousin. And Carver's cousin, whose name was Marion, was a compact woman of about 50 who had clearly been given a brief summary, and had decided on her own terms what that summary meant about Olivia. What it seemed to mean was practical assistance offered without commentary, showed her the apartment with the brisk efficiency of someone who had somewhere else to be and trusted her to figure out the rest. Working heater, working shower, hot water, a bed in the back room with sheets that were clean and a blanket that was adequate, a small kitchen with a working refrigerator containing, she had discovered after Marion left, a jug of orange juice, a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, and 6 eggs. She stood in the kitchen and looked at the eggs for a long moment. Then she sat down on the floor with her back against the cabinet, not because there wasn't a chair, because she had been sitting on floors for long enough, but because she had been on floors for long enough that they felt more stable than chairs, and she put her hands over her face and held herself very still for about 3 minutes. She didn't cry. She had trained herself out of it mostly. The first months of being alone. Because crying alone was one of those things that used up more than it returned. But she held herself still and breathed and let whatever was moving through her move through her without naming it. The heater clicked on. The radiator knocked twice and then settled into a low, steady warmth. It had been cold for 4 months. She held still and let the warmth arrive. She didn't sleep well because sleeping well in a new place required a kind of trust her body didn't issue automatically. She woke 3 times. Checked the door, the windows, checked the windows. She assured herself of where she was and confirmed that it remained stable. Returned to something that was at least horizontal and warm. By 6 in the morning, she was up, showered the shower. It was something she hadn't realized. She'd needed to feel like a person until she felt like a person again, and sitting at the kitchen table with eggs she'd scrambled on the actually functional stove with the concentrated attention she brought to all food. Though there was a different quality to it this morning that she couldn't quite name. She was thinking about Gregory Walsh, not about what he'd done to her specifically. What he'd said, "You have no money, you have no one in this city who knows your name." The way he'd said it, with the confidence a man who had used that particular argument many times and found it consistently effective. About the maintenance worker who'd nodded when his rate changed and gone back to work. Karen with the blue Corolla, and the daughter in 2nd grade, and the jobs she needed too much to risk losing. Thinking about Stone, asking, "Can you remember anything specific?" He had a library card and access to a computer. She had time. She started making a list. Not names, she didn't know most of their names. Details. The blue Corolla. The man who did maintenance, the approximate timing of when she'd seen Gregory change his rate. The woman who'd come back in for a 3rd week, even after the incident Olivia had witnessed, which meant she was still there. Still working, still needing, by hand in the margin of the bus schedule she'd been carrying for 3 months. Because it was the only paper she had. He wrote, small and careful and specific, the way she'd been trained by necessity to hold on to details that others would throw away. When she had filled both margins, she turned it over and kept going on the back. She was back at the hospital by 9:30 and was not alone this time. 2 men from the previous night's convoy were in the room. One she didn't know, one who she recognized as Carver, and they stopped talking when she came in. And the particular quality of the silence told her they had been discussing something that had just reached a significant point. And looked at her, and then at the folded bus schedule in her hand. "You have something," he said. "Details," she said. "From what I saw. Names where I have them. Descriptions where I don't. Timing, patterns." She set the bus schedule on the bed beside him. "I don't know if it's useful." Stone looked at the bus schedule, the small, dense handwriting covering both sides, and then at Carver. Picked it up. He read for 30 seconds, not skimming. "Reliable as this," he said, looking at her. "I saw what I saw," she said. "I can't tell you what I didn't see. But what's there, I'm sure of." Looked at Stone. Stone looked at the ceiling briefly, the way he'd done the previous day when he was processing something. His name's Walsh, Carver said to the other man. Gregory Walsh, the Ridgeline Rest. The other man said nothing, but something moved in his face. Stone said. Know of him, the man said. He had a brother stay there about 2 years back. There's a situation with his property. Cash, some personal items. When Walsh said they couldn't account for it, a pause. He dropped it. Because nobody could prove anything. The room was quiet. Olivia stood in the middle of it and understood what the silence contained. It wasn't rage, exactly. It was the stillness that preceded a decision that had already been made. Stone said, Olivia. She looked at him. Thank you, he said, for coming back. Simple thing to say. He said it simply. But she heard the layer, under the simplicity, the recognition that she could have taken the key and the eggs and the warm apartment and not come back, could have let the distance grow, decided that she had done enough and that the rest of it wasn't hers to carry. The list last night, she said. I couldn't sleep anyway. Almost smiled again. I believe that. What happens now, she said. Folded the bus, scheduled carefully, and put it in his jacket pocket. We make some calls, he said. And we talked to some people. Gregory Walsh. Eventually, Carver said, first to the people on this list. Something shifted in her chest. They're going to be scared, she said. If anyone comes asking, they're going to be scared. It'll cost them the jobs. That's why we're careful about how we do it, Carver said. He looked at her with that direct assessment again. We've done this before. She didn't ask what this was, exactly, or in what capacity they had done it before. Believed him, which was either trust or desperation or both. And she was self-aware enough to acknowledge she wasn't certain which. What she was certain about was this, she had said something that needed to be said, and it had been heard, and now it was in motion. She had handed the problem to people who had more power than she did to address it. She hadn't been able to say anything for months because she had no power. She had power now, or rather she had people, which was what power looked like when you didn't have it yourself. She said, you doing okay? I made eggs this morning, she said. Eggs on an actual stove. He looked at her. Something in his face was difficult to name, not quite pain, not quite pride, some that occupied the space between them. Good, he said. It's fine. She was efficient. It's Marion, he said. I wrote her a note, Olivia said, thanking her. I left it under the door of the management office. Looked at her for a moment. You write a thank you note to someone who shows you a room, he said. My mother taught me to write thank you notes, she said. Things stick. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, tell me about your grandmother. And something about the question, simple and direct and indicating genuine interest in a person no one had asked about in a very long time, made Olivia's carefully maintained composure develop a hairline crack that she recognized immediately, and stored alongside the recognition that she was not as fully healed from everything as she worked very hard to appear. She made very strong coffee, Olivia said carefully. She believed that a person should always return what didn't belong to them. She was particular about that. Stone was quiet. She sounds like someone I would have respected, he said. Been suspicious of you, Olivia said. Honestly, she was suspicious of motorcycles. She thought they were one of the 3 most dangerous things in American life. The other 2. Unverified information and men who don't ask for directions. She did something she hadn't seen before. He laughed short and genuine. The kind that comes before the body has a chance to curate it. The kind that costs something from people who don't usually spend it freely. He winced slightly when he did it. Because of the cardiac situation, and she said immediately, sorry. Sorry, he said. God, don't be sorry. He was still half lawing, careful about it. Remember, I can't remember the last time someone made me do that. Your heart monitor kept its pace. Outside the window and had stopped, and the light coming in was the thin, pale quality of November's sun that is doing its best. Came back and 15 minutes later with a phone pressed to his ear, held it away from his face and said to Stone, Walsh fired 3 people this morning. Them were on her list. The laughter was gone. That Olivia. He's covering. He knows I talked to you, she said. Isn't a question. Probably someone told him you were here yesterday, Carver said. The motel's not a big community. She thought of Marcus, then dismissed it. This had helped her find Danny. Marcus had. She thought about it. Marcus had been 17 and scared and in an impossible position. She didn't blame him. The woman with the blue Corolla, she said to Carver. Was she one of them? Carver checked his phone. She wasn't on his payroll. Cleaned rooms, but he paid her cash off the books. She's not on any record, which meant she had even less protection than the others. Leah looked at Stone. I need to talk to her, she said. She'll talk to me. You don't have to. Stone started. I don't have to, she said. That doesn't seem to be how this works. Stone held her gaze. Then he said, Carver will get you an address. His full name was Karen Delacroix. She lived in a small house on the south side of the city with her daughter Maisie, age 7, and her mother-in-law, Dolores, had arrived to help. After Karen's husband left 18 months earlier and had stayed because she was the kind of woman who stayed. Stood outside the house for 3 minutes before knocking, the way she'd stood outside the hospital room the day before. And she thought, I'm 19, sleep behind a diner. I have no idea what I'm doing. And then she knocked. Karen answered the door with the expression of a woman who had been expecting bad news for so long, no face, that her face had arranged itself into a posture of preemptive bracing. She was 34, dark-haired, tired, in a way that wasn't just about today, but about the accumulated weight of a string of days that had each required more than she had to give. She looked at Olivia. I remember you, she said, from the motel. You cleaned rooms. Yes, I'm Olivia. I know who you are, Karen said. Carefully, Gregory called this morning. He said, she stopped. He said if anyone came asking me questions, I should know that I was never formally employed there. If there was any investigation or anything like that, it wouldn't be in my interest to be involved. Olivia said, he's right that you were never formally employed. He's wrong about what that means. She paused. Can I come in? Looked at her for a long moment. Then she stepped back from the door and sighed. Maisie was at the kitchen table with a worksheet, and Dolores was at the counter slicing bread. Both of them looked at Olivia with the particular calibrated assessment of people who had developed good threat evaluation skills by necessity. This was some people who are looking into Gregory Walsh. Calm, and said, which was a compressed and somewhat charitable summary of a situation Olivia hadn't fully explained, which she decided to let stand. He shorted you, Olivia said to Karen quietly, and you came back because you needed the work. He told me the quality was below standard, Karen said, when that the first week was fine, but the second week, the rooms weren't up to his requirements. It's not why he shorted you. Karen looked at the table. Maisie had stopped writing and was listening with the tuned attention of a child who has learned to track adult conversations for information relevant to her security. You know, that's not why, Karen said. She said it quietly. You knew it when he said it. But Maisie's school is 2 blocks away and I walk her there every morning. And I needed the income. And if I pushed back, he'd find a reason to fire me outright. And then I'd have nothing, Olivia said. So I didn't push back. I know. Looked at her. So what do you want me to do now? Talk to someone? Make a statement? I'm not on any payroll. I have no documentation. I have a 7-year-old and a mother-in-law who's already stretched thin from helping us. Gregory Walsh decides I'm a problem. There are people who can make it so he can't retaliate, Olivia said. I can't promise you anything specific, but I can tell you that the people I've been talking to have more resources than Gregory Walsh does and more motivation to use them. She paused. All I'm asking is whether you're willing to have a conversation. You can say no. Maisie said from the table, Mom. Looked at her daughter. The lady walked here, Maisie said, with the clear observational accuracy of a 7-year-old. And when she doesn't have a car. Karen looked at Olivia's wet shoes and the backpack over her shoulder and the binder clip on her jacket. Olivia confirmed. I don't have a car. Something shifted in Karen's face. In quality softened. Not into naivety. Karen Delacroix was not a naive person, but into the recalibrated form of trust that people extend when they recognize in someone else. One, the specific kind of exhaustion that comes from doing right things in hard situations. You're done. Sit down, Karen said. The second time in 2 days, Olivia sat at a table that wasn't hers, one in a house that wasn't hers, and began carefully eating. Honestly, without promises. She couldn't keep to make the case that the thing Gregory Walsh had built his operation on, absolute certainty that no one would speak, was about to stop being true. He talked for 40 minutes. Karen listened. Dolores brought them both coffee without being asked. At the end of 40 minutes, Karen said, "All right, I'll talk to them," she sighed. A child somewhere on the block was riding a bicycle, and the sound of it came through the thin walls of the house, and Olivia thought once, something is moving. Something is moving that wasn't moving before. She didn't know yet how far it would go, but she had started it, and she was beginning to understand slowly. In the careful way she approached things that mattered, that starting things was something she was better at than she had known. Delacroix made one phone call that night. She called a woman named Sheila Tran, who had worked the Ridgeline Rest's breakfast service for 14 months. Before Gregory Walsh had told her, on a Tuesday morning in August, her hours were being reduced due to seasonal slowdown. The slowdown was a fiction. Sheila knew it was a fiction because she had been at the motel long enough to understand its rhythms, and August was not slow. August was the opposite of slow. But Gregory had said it with the confidence of a man who knew she had nowhere to dispute it. Fick. And Sheila had taken the reduced hours and said nothing because she was 41 years old and supporting a mother with a dialysis schedule and a car with 93,000 miles on it that needed new tires. Sheila called a man named Robert Gaines, who had done maintenance at the motel for 2 years and 4 months, and whose rate Gregory had adjusted downward twice, both times with a different explanation that had the quality of something prepared in advance. Gaines said he knew 3 other people. By the time Olivia woke up the next morning in the apartment on Alcott Street, there were 7 names on Carver's phone that hadn't been there the night before. At noon, there were 11. Each name came attached to a story, and each story had the same structural bones, the initial fair ritual. Erosion, the explanation that felt wrong but couldn't be proved. The decision to stay silent because the cost of speaking was higher than the cost of being cheated. Walsh had built something careful and self-sustaining, the kind of operation that survived precisely because each individual wrong was too small to justify the risk of fighting it. He had not accounted for was a 19-year-old girl who had nothing left to lose and a bus schedule with notes in the margins. Olivia found out about the 11 names when she arrived at the hospital at 9:15 and found Stone's room more crowded than it had any medical justification for being. Was there. And Danny, she'd seen in the parking lot the first night, but hadn't spoken to, a woman in her mid-50s named Paulette, who turned out to be a local attorney and who had the crisp, evaluative manner of someone who charged by the hour and was currently not charging. Paulette looked at Olivia the way people looked at things that were more complicated than they had expected. "Started this," she said. "I returned some money," Olivia said. "And then you went and talked to Karen Delacroix." "Yes, and Karen talked to Sheila, and Sheila talked to Robert. And now I have 11 potential clients sitting on a pattern that goes back at least 4 years." Paulette paused. "All because you returned some money and then couldn't let it go. On that list we're getting stolen from," Olivia said. "I knew about it and I had the chance to say something." Paulette looked at her for a moment that Olivia held without flinching. "How old are you?" Paulette said. 19. "Have you eaten breakfast?" The question was so unexpected that it took Olivia a half second to process it. "Yes," she said. "Eggs." "Good," Paulette said and turned back to Stone. One had been watching this exchange with the focused attention he brought to everything. When something in his face had settled into a quality she was beginning to identify as satisfaction, not pleasure. Exactly. Recognition of things going in the direction they ought to go. "It's going to file," he said. "A wage theft claim," Paulette said. "Multiple complainants. Documented pattern. 4 years of history if we can get the records." Walsh is going to have a problem. He fired people yesterday, Olivia said, when he heard I'd been here. 2 of them were people I'd identified. Paulette's expression changed, but something sharpened in it. Retaliatory termination, she said almost to herself. Actually helpful. That's documentation of awareness. He does this because people don't fight back, Olivia said, because they're weak. Because fighting back costs something they can't afford to spend. Counted on that for years. He's counted on it correctly, Paulette said, until now. The room was quiet for a moment, with the particular quality of a room in which a decision has just become real. Said Olivia. She looked at him. You're going to be part of this, he said, if you're willing. As a witness, potentially. Paulette will need your account of the conversation he had with you about the envelope. She had thought about this on the bus ride over. The specific arithmetic of it, stepping into a legal situation as a homeless 19-year-old with no documented address and a work history that was entirely off the books. The ways Gregory Walsh could complicate that. The ways his attorney, and he would have one, she had no doubt about, that could use her circumstances against her credibility. She thought about it for most of the bus ride. He'll go after my situation, she said to Paulette. My housing, the fact that I was sleeping at the motel after hours. Say, I was trespassing. And that everything I'm claiming happened in a context I have no right to have been in, Paulette said. He'll say, I'm the one who took the money originally, and that returning it was a cover story. You might. Can you work with that? Paulette looked at her steadily. With worse, she said. The question is whether you can. Olivia thought about the maintenance worker who had nodded and gone back to work. She thought about Karen's face at the door, braced for news she'd already decided was bad. She thought about Sheila Tran and the dialysis schedule and the tires with 93,000 miles. She said, Gregory Walsh found out about the attorney on a Thursday. Told her later that the information reached Gregory through the particular clerk of a small information network, Kamal Commercial District, where everyone knew everyone else's business and where the presence of a 55-year-old attorney with a yellow, asking questions at the coffee shop 3 doors down from the Ridgeline Rest was not something that went unnoticed. His first move was to call Marcus. Marcus was 17 years old and had known Gregory Walsh for 8 months and had watched from behind the front desk. Things he hadn't understood at the time, but understood better now. He was also the person who had let Olivia into room 7, given Danny her general location and direction of travel, who had, in a technical sense, made everything that followed possible. Gregory called him. Gone. Just listened to what Gregory said, and then said, You didn't. I don't know anything about that. You didn't. Which was not true. Gregory knew it wasn't true. Marcus knew. Gregory knew. They both stayed on the line for a silence that was full of the things neither of them was saying. Marcus said, My mom knows a lawyer. Family law, not this kind of thing. But she knows one. Gregory said, I don't need you to know a lawyer, Marcus. I need you to tell me what you told these people. You told them the truth, Marcus said. Another silence. Fired, Gregory said. Marcus had expected this, which was the only reason it didn't land harder than it did. Okay, then, and hung up the phone and sat in his car in the parking lot of the gas station where he'd taken the call on his break and thought about what he had just done and decided he was not sorry about it. Surprised him slightly because he had thought he would be. To the hospital. Gone. He had never been there before. He had no particular reason to go. He knew the address from the night he'd called it in. When Olivia found Stone, he drove there because it was the only place he could think of that had anything to do with what was happening. He found Danny in the parking structure, leaning against a motorcycle and eating chips from a vending machine bag. Just got fired, Marcus said. Danny looked at him for a moment. Walsh? Yeah, for talking to us, for telling them the truth, Marcus said, because that was what it was. Danny was quiet for a second. Then he said, come upstairs. And heard the story with the same focused stillness he brought to everything. And when Marcus finished, Stone looked at Paulette, who had come back that afternoon with a yellow legal pad now covered in notes. Retaliatory termination of a minor employee, Paulette said. It was also now a witness. She wrote something on the pad. Walsh is having a very bad week and he doesn't fully know it yet. Then Marcus looked around the room at the bikers, at the attorney. Not the blue one, at Stone in the hospital bed, Olivia in the chair by the window, with the expression of someone who has stepped into a situation considerably larger than they had calculated. Is she okay? He said to Stone, nodding at Olivia. When she left, he stopped. He said some things. She walked out. I'm fine, Olivia said from the window. He said, Marcus stopped again, recalibrated. He has a way of talking about people, about what they're worth, what they can and can't do. He looked at Olivia. Didn't say anything when he said it about you. I should have. He called Danny, she said. You told him I was walking to the hospital. It's not the same as Marcus. She said it quietly, but with an evenness that stopped him. That counts. He looked at her for a moment. He was 17 and he was trying to work out what kind of person he was, which was the specific work of 17 when she could see it happening in real time, he said. Stone said, Paulette, can't you add him to the documentation? Doing it, Paulette said. Writing. Twist that nobody had anticipated arrived on Friday afternoon. Came in with the particular contained quality of a man holding information that was about to change the shape of everything, and he waited until the room was down to just Stone, Olivia, and Danny before he sat down and put his phone on the bed between them. Walsh has a partner, he said. Stone looked at him. Partner, Carver said. The Ridgeline Rest is owned on paper by Walsh, but there's a second name on the original incorporation documents, who put up 40% of the capital when Walsh bought the property 11 years ago and has been taking 40% of the net since. He paused. Is Leonard Poole. The name meant nothing to Olivia. It meant something to Stone. She could see it in the slight shift of his jaw. The way his eyes moved to a fixed middle point and stayed there for a half second. Poole, Stone said. You know him, Carver said. It wasn't a question. I know of him, Stone said. He runs a property management company on the north side. 4 or 5 commercial properties, couple of rental buildings. He's been in front of the city council twice in the last 3 years. Zoning variances, both times pushed through, without much resistance. He paused. His relationships. What kind of relationships? Olivia said. Stone looked at her. The kind that make things go away, he said. Silence. He's been silent for a reason, Carver said. Walsh is the face of the operation. Poole stays invisible. If Walsh gets exposed, Poole's first move is going to be to establish that he was a passive investor with no operational involvement. You do that? Olivia said. He can try, Paulette said from the doorway. Come back. Olivia hadn't heard her return, and she was standing with her legal pad, and an expression that Olivia was beginning to read as the version of Paulette's face that appeared when she, or something, she intended to be very thorough about. But passive investors who take 40% of net revenue over 11 years tend to have a harder time claiming ignorance than they anticipate. She walked to the chair and sat down and opened the legal pad to a new page. Me about Leonard Poole, she said, with Leonard Poole as Paulette. Laid it out over the next 2 hours was that he was the kind of man who insulated himself with enough layers of procedural distance that direct accountability was difficult to establish, and ran the motel. Walsh hired and paid the workers. Walsh set the rates. Poole sat in a property management office on the north side and received quarterly statements. Workers' legal claims were against Walsh directly. Paulette was clear about this, but there was another dimension to what Gregory Walsh had been doing, and it was this dimension that had Carver making phone calls in the hallway and Stone watching the ceiling with the focused stillness of a man running calculations he wasn't sharing. Ridgeline Rest's books, as far as anyone had been able to access them, showed a consistent pattern of wages paid at the agreed rate. The cash workers, Karen, others like her, didn't appear in the books at all. Workers who were on record showed correct wages, which meant the shortfall, the money Walsh had been pocketing from the gap between what he said he'd pay and what he actually paid, was not appearing anywhere. It's disappearing. He's running the wage theft off the books, Paulette said, which means it's not just labor law. If we can document the amounts, it's potentially fraud. And if the revenue from that fraud has been flowing in any form to Poole's quarterly distributions, then Poole has a different kind of problem, Stone said. Exactly. Olivia had been quiet through most of this, listening with the concentrated attention she brought to information that had structural implications she needed to understand. She was not trained in law or finance. She was, however, good at seeing the load-bearing elements of a system, and because she had spent years identifying the load-bearing elements of her own survival. Workers who were paid cash, she said. They won't have any documentation, Paulette said, so their testimony is all they have. Essentially, which means the quality of what they're willing to say and how credibly they can say it matters a lot. Yes. Olivia looked at Stone. I need to go back and talk to them again, she said. Not to coach them, to make sure they understand what they're walking into. The ones who are scared, and most of them are scared, they need to know what it actually looks like. Not a version that minimizes it. She paused. Walsh is going to come at them. They need to be ready for that. And said, that's not a small thing to take on. I know, she held his gaze, but if they go in without understanding and they get shaken by something Walsh's attorney does, it hurts everyone's case. He looked at Paulette. Paulette looked at Olivia. You ever thought about law school? Olivia blinked. Have a G. That wasn't what I asked. A silence. Now I'm thinking about 11 people who need to feel like they can do this, Olivia said. Everything else is, she gestured vaguely. Everything else is later. Paulette made a note. She spent Friday evening and Saturday morning at Karen's house, then at Sheila's apartment across town, then at a barber shop that Robert Gaines owned one day a week as a side operation. Two of the other workers had agreed to come and talk. She took the bus everywhere. She brought a notebook that Stone had asked Danny to get from the hospital gift shop, an actual notebook, spiral-bound, bus schedule in the margins, and she wrote down everything that had potential legal relevance and distinguished it clearly from everything that was personal and contextual and human and real, but wouldn't hold up in a room with a judge. She was honest with all of them. That was the most important thing. He told Sheila, Walsh's attorney is going to question why you didn't report this at the time. The answer, that you needed the job and couldn't afford the risk, is true, and Paulette can work with it, but you have to be able to say it plainly and not apologize for it. Sheila said, I don't apologize for surviving. Then say exactly that, Olivia said. Exactly like that. She told Robert. They might try to say the rate change was a legitimate business decision. You need to be specific about the conversation, where he changed it, the exact words he used, where you were standing, what time of day. Specific details hold up. Generalities don't, Robert said. I remember exactly where we were standing. Remember, because I had just fixed the dryer in room 9, and I had lint on my shirt, and I was embarrassed about it when he came and stood in front of me. Wrote that down. The lint on the shirt, the room number, specificity of a true memory. That's good, she said. Exactly what you tell Paulette. At the barber shop, one of the other workers, a woman in her late 20s named Deja, who had cleaned rooms at the motel for 6 months the previous year, said something that stopped Olivia. He told me I was lucky to have the work, Deja said. Almost exactly what he said. He said, someone in your situation should be glad for the work, don't you think? And he said it so normal. Like it was just a thing you said. Olivia was quiet for a moment. One in your situation, she said. Because I had a record, Deja said. Years old. Nothing violent, but it's on paper. He knew it would make it harder for me to find work anywhere else, and he used it. She paused. Should have quit. I knew something was wrong the minute he said that. Stayed, Olivia said. I stayed 4 months. He cut my rate twice. Why did you stay? Deja looked at her. Because I needed to eat, she said. Same reason you already know. You held her gaze. I do know, she said, and I want you to tell Paulette exactly what you just told me. Exact sentence he used. Because it's not just wage theft. Specific people. Specifically, because he thought they couldn't fight back. It was quiet. It means it was deliberate, Olivia said. It means he knew what he was doing, and he chose people he thought were vulnerable on purpose. She paused. Changes what this is. Something moved in Deja's face, something that had been wound tight for a long time, and was beginning, carefully, to loosen. What's wrong, Deja said, about the not being able to fight back part. And Olivia said, he was. She was on the bus back to the hospital Saturday afternoon when her phone rang. Repaid, which Stone had quietly arranged to have refilled. She had discovered this when she tried to make a call and found she had full minutes, and she had held the phone for a moment with the specific feeling of someone receiving a gift that was too practical to refuse. Carver. Walsh went to the motel workers this morning, he said, of the ones Paulette has documented. He showed up at their homes. Olivia's chest tightened. What did he say? Different versions. But the through line was fishy, hon. He had attorney-client information suggesting that any legal claim they filed would result in their immigration status, employment history, personal, financial records being scrutinized in a formal proceeding. A beat. Trying to scare them out of it. Did it work? Pause. Two of them called Paulette directly after he left, Carver said. Angry. Olivia let out a breath. The third one, Carver said, is a woman named Miriam. She's undocumented. Walsh knew that, and he knew she knew he knew it, and he used it specifically and directly. Silence on the line. Where is she? Olivia said. She won't come forward, Carver said. She's scared, understandably. Is she safe? Right now, is she safe? As far as we know. Olivia pressed the heel of her hand against her forehead. Do anything for her without requiring her to be part of the case. Paulette says yes. She doesn't need to file anything. She can't be a witness. Then she's not a witness. Olivia was quiet for a moment, but she's in his records somewhere. He knew her status, which means he used it as leverage, which means there's documentation of that somewhere, even if she never testifies. It was quiet for a moment. I'll tell Paulette. He went to people's homes. Olivia said, on a Saturday morning. It means he's scared. He wouldn't do that if he wasn't scared. Yeah, Carver said, which means we're doing something right. He went something in the pause. She heard something in the pause that might have been Carver's version of agreeing. She got off the bus, 3 stops early, and walked the rest of the way to the hospital. Not because she needed the hoss. Not because she needed the walk, but because she needed the time between Carver's call and Stone's room to settle what she was feeling into something functional. Walsh had gone to those people's homes. He had stood on their doorsteps, the doorsteps of people who had already been cheated and were already scared. And he had tried to use their vulnerability against them one more time. He was doing what he had always done. He was doing the only thing he knew how to do, which was find the places where people were soft and apply pressure there. She'd understood him. She did not underestimate him. She also understood something he didn't, because Gregory Walsh had never once been in the position of having nothing, and so he could not fully calculate what happened to people when you took everything from them and they survived it anyway. You had nothing to lose. She knew what that felt like from the inside. She pushed through the hospital's front door. Stone knew something had happened before she said a word. He looked at her face and said, "What?" She told him about Walsh going to the houses. She told him about Miriam. She told him what Carver had said and what she had said and what it meant. Onson. Stone listened with his hands flat on the blanket, which was what he did when he was controlling something. When she finished, he said, he's trying to collapse the case before Paulette can formalize it, which means he's already talked to an attorney, which means Leonard Poole knows, she said. Stone looked at her. She saw in his face that he had reached the same conclusion on the same timeline and that he was recalibrating something. Poole, Stone said. He said it the way you said the name of a problem that had just become a different kind of problem. Poole gets ahead of this, Olivia said. He separates himself from Walsh, and Walsh takes the hit alone. Walsh loses the motel, probably. Fines, maybe. But Poole walks away, and everything he's built on the north side stays intact, and he finds another Walsh somewhere else. Stone's jaw tightened. That's not acceptable, he said. She agreed. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I need to make a call. Whom? Someone who knows people on the city council. He said it simply. Pool zoning variances, the ones that went through without resistance. I want to know who pushed them through and why, and whether there's a connection to Pool that should be documented before Pool has a chance to manage his image. He looked at her. City council has a public ethics process. It's slow and it's bureaucratic, but it creates a record. And Pool's name in a public record connected to Walsh's case is something he can't make disappear. Olivia considered this. You have access to that? He looked at her with the expression of a man who has lived 62 years and operated in a particular world for most of them. You know people, he said. The Hells Angels know city council members, she said. Hells Angels know everyone, he said. We're a large organization. We vote. We have members who are business owners, contractors, people who've been part of communities for 30 years. A pause. Underestimate that. Walsh underestimated it. Pool is going to underestimate it. She thought about the convoy pulling into the Ridgeline Rest parking lot, 12 motorcycles, patches, road-worn faces. The image that word carried, the assumptions it triggered. The distance between that image and the man in front of her with his legal strategy and his attorney and his 11 names and his city council contacts. Can I ask you something, she said. Yes. The money, she said. The $18,000. You were taking it to a young woman who needed a fresh start somewhere. What happens to that now? She paused. With you in here. Stone looked at her steadily. Her name is Brianna, he said. She's 22. I called her the morning I woke up. Was holding the envelope. The plan hasn't changed. She know what happened. She knows I'm in the hospital. She wanted to come. A pause. I told her to stay where she was. That the situation was handled. He looked at Olivia. Because of you. Olivia was quiet. Does she know about me? She said. You know, someone found it and gave it back, Stone said. She said he stopped for a moment. Something moved in his face that was private, and he let it pass before continuing. She said that kind of person was worth knowing. Olivia looked out the window. November light was thin and honest. The kind of light that showed things as they actually were. You'd like to meet her someday, she said. I think that can be arranged, Stone said. The thing that broke open happened Monday morning, and it came from a direction nobody had been watching. A man named Theodore Birch walked into Paulette's office at 9:47 a.m. He was 63 years old and had worked as an accountant for 11 years, the last 4 of which had included as a piece of work he had understood to be irregular, but had not been able to refuse, the maintenance of a secondary set of books for the Ridgeline Rest Motel. He sat down across from Paulette and put a folder on her desk. Inside the folder were 4 years of financial records, 2 sets. The legitimate books Gregory Walsh filed with the state. The second set the real accounting, that showed the actual wages paid. The actual cash disbursements, the actual gap between what Walsh said he was paying and what he was actually paying. And at the bottom of a column that Birch had labeled simply distribution, the quarterly payments to Leonard Poole that reflected not the legitimate net revenue, but the total net revenue, including the stolen wages. Paulette said. Birch looked at his hands. My daughter, he said, last Thursday. She'd been working the front desk for 8 months. A pause. She's 24. Paulette was quiet for a moment. She wasn't on my list, Olivia said. From the chair to the left, where she had been sitting, with the notebook, present at Paulette's invitation. It wasn't off the books, Birch said. She was on the real payroll, correct rate. Walsh wasn't stupid enough to cheat the accountant's daughter directly. He looked at Olivia. He hired her Thursday because she was asking questions about the people who'd been coming to talk to Stone Hayes. About it through Marcus, they went to school together. And she started looking at things she had access to through the front desk and asking questions Walsh didn't like. Olivia was very still. She's okay, she said. She's angry, Birch said. So she's 24. And she just found out the man she worked for has been systematically stealing from vulnerable people for 4 years, and she's very angry. He looked at Paulette for that anger to be of use to someone. Paulette opened the folder. She didn't say anything for almost a full minute. Reading. She said, Mr. Birch, I need you to understand something. This folder changes this case from a labor dispute into a criminal matter. What you're handing me is evidence of wire fraud, tax fraud, and given that some of the cash disbursements here have characteristics consistent with money laundering, potentially federal involvement. She paused. You prepared for what that means for you? Your involvement with these records? Which was quiet. He was 63 years old and tired in a way that had nothing to do with a single bad night and everything to do with 4 years of knowing something was wrong and doing it anyway and telling himself the math was too complicated to disrupt. Should have done this sooner, he said. Probably, Paulette said. Doing it now. I'm going to need you to talk to someone else as well. Contact. She looked at him carefully. What you're giving me is going to help 11 people who were robbed. If it connects to Leonard Poole the way I think it connects, it might help considerably more. She paused. But it's going to be a process, and it's going to be public. You ready for that? Birch looked at the folder on Paulette's desk. Your daughter asked me. Last night, he said, whether I was a good man. He stopped. With her, I'd been a careful man. She said that wasn't what she asked. Quiet. Olivia thought of her grandmother, the strong coffee. The certainty about returning what didn't belong to you. Those aren't the same thing, she said quietly. Not to Birch specifically. It's into the room. Birch looked at her. No, he said. He looked at Paulette. Tell me what I need to do, he said. He called Stone from the bus. We have the books, she said. Silence. Both sets, she said. Another silence. Door Birch, she said. Walsh's accountant. Walsh fired his daughter on Thursday. Stone breathed. And Poole, she said. It's in the distributions. Stone said, Olivia, yes. How do you feel? It's not the question she'd expected. She looked out the bus window at the November afternoon, at the ordinary street doing its ordinary things, at a woman walking a dog and 2 kids on bikes, and a man arguing pleasantly with a parking meter. Like something that was wrong for a long time is about to be less wrong, she said. I don't know what word that is. Justice, Stone said. Seems too big. Maybe it is, he said. Maybe start with right. About to be more right. She thought about that. You feeling? She said, medically. The doctor says I can probably go home in 3 days if nothing else happens. Olivia? Yes, you've been running all over this city for 4 days on a bus. To people, writing things down, going to meetings. A pause. You're doing this while sleeping in an apartment you just moved into and eating eggs you cook yourself. And you haven't asked for anything. She didn't answer. I want you to know, he said. His voice had changed in a way that was difficult to navigate. It had lost the strategic layer and become something simpler. That what you set in motion this week is not a small thing. People who are being stolen from are going to have a case. Remains one. A man who has been running an operation built on other people's vulnerability is going to answer for it. Another man who thought he was invisible is about to find out he isn't. A pause, but with you returning an envelope. It started with you leaving an envelope. Somewhere I'd find it, she said. He said, and with Marcus calling Danny, and Danny picking me up in the rain, and Karen opening her door, she paused. It's not one thing. A lot of people doing one small thing each. Yes, Stone said, but someone has to go first. She held the phone and watched the street through the window and thought about going first. About the 4 minutes in room 7 with the envelope in her hand. Arithmetic. About the arithmetic of a clean apartment and 2.5 years of rent. Who she'd be if she took it. I should let you rest, she said. A pause. Come by tomorrow? Yes, she said. Put the phone in her jacket pocket. The bus moved through the November afternoon. She had a notebook full of details that were going to matter to 11 people's cases. She had a warm apartment waiting at the end of the line. She had eggs in the refrigerator. She had not had this much in a very long time. She held still in the moving bus and let herself feel the weight of it, not the anxiety of it, not the impermanence of it, not the waiting for it to be taken away quality that she had trained herself to attach to good things as a form of preemptive armor. The weight, just the fact of it. The bus carried her home through the ordinary city, and something that she had kept very carefully folded up and put away in a place where it couldn't be reached or damaged, opened slightly, like a fist learning to be a hand. He let it. Stone came home on a Wednesday to a house, exactly to the house. Carver kept on the east side of Knoxville, a wide, story place that had the particular quality of a space maintained by people who valued function over presentation. There was a long table in the main room that could seat 12. Always people moving through it, stopping, eating, then leaving again. Stone had been using it as a base when he was in Knoxville for the past 6 years. People who moved through it had learned to navigate around each other with the practiced ease of people who understood the rules without having to discuss them. Had been there twice before, once to drop off the notebook for Carver when he was meeting with Paulette. Once because Stone had asked her to come and go over something in Paulette's updated file. Both times she had stayed close to the edges of the space, sitting in the mode she knew best. Present, useful. Not occupying more room than necessary. When the Wednesday Stone came home, changed the geometry of that. He walked in under his own power, which he had insisted on, despite the hospital's suggestion of a wheelchair to the car, which had 7 people in it when he arrived. Rearranged itself around him with the particular ease of people who genuinely cared about someone and had been waiting for them. There's nothing performed about it. No ceremony. Just the shift of a room when something important that had been missing returns to its right place. He looked at Olivia first across the room before he looked at anyone else. She was sitting at the far end of the long table with the notebook open and a cup of coffee that had gone cold, going over the timeline Paulette needed organized for the federal filing. She saw him come in. She stood without deciding to. "You look better," she said. "I feel better," he said. "Here is better than the hospital." That's a low bar. Everything's a low bar compared to the hospital. He crossed the room and pulled out the chair across from her and sat down with the careful deliberateness that was still there, his body still requiring negotiation, but lighter than it had been. When gone, the hospital had reduced him in a way that was visibly reversing. "You're working on timeline for Paulette. Contact wants the sequence of events documented from first contact to the Birch disclosure." She turned the notebook toward him, going back through everything, trying to make sure the order is exactly right. He looked at the notebook. The careful handwriting, the precise dates, the way she had flagged items that had potential evidentiary weight versus items that were contextual. "You did this yourself?" he said. "Paulette gave me the framework. I filled in the specifics." He looked at it for another moment. "You have good instincts for this," he said. "For organizing information, knowing which information matters." He looked up at her. "That's not the same thing as organization. Lots of people can organize. Everybody can identify what's load-bearing." She thought of the bus ride where she'd had the same thought about herself. My mother called it reading the room. She said, "You meant it, socially. But I think it works for everything. Woman, the smartest person I've known." She paused. "Maybe." Stone looked at her for a moment with that focused quality she had stopped finding unnerving and started finding simply honest, the look of someone who saw things as they were and didn't embellish in either direction. "You flatter me," he said. "I missed a partner who was stealing from vulnerable people for 11 years. "Lo, wasn't your partner," she said. "He was Walsh's partner. You didn't know Walsh. I should have looked into the motel before we stayed there. We had a cardiac event," she said. "You get some grace." Something moved in his face that wasn't quite amusement and wasn't quite gratitude. It was the expression of someone receiving something they hadn't asked for and were surprised to find they needed. "You're not good at grace," he said. "I've noticed," she said. "Pick on it." Danny from across the room made a sound that was definitively a suppressed laugh and looked at him. Danny found something to study on the ceiling. Paulette called at 2 in the afternoon. She called Stone's phone and he put it on speaker because Olivia was there and he had established, without formally announcing it, that she was part of this. Olivia had noticed this pattern Over the past week, the way he consistently included her, not as a favor or a charitable gesture, but as a practical acknowledgement that she had become functionally central to the case she had accidentally started. Contact reviewed the Birch documents. Paulette said, opening, a preliminary inquiry, a silence in the room. Means, Stone said, it means Walsh and Poole are no longer managing a labor dispute, managing a federal attention situation. The distinction matters because the resources available, Milo, to them to make this go away just got significantly more expensive to deploy. A pause. Our 11 clients' claims get filed in an environment where Walsh is already under pressure, which is considerably better than filing cold. Walsh's attorney, Stone said, filed a motion this morning asking to delay the labor claims pending Walsh's engagement with the preliminary inquiry, which is aggressive and slightly absurd, and tells me his attorney is either very good or very panicked. Both probably. Paulette paused. There's something else. One of the workers on our list, Deja Morris, she wasn't just an employee at the Ridgeline Rest. She was also, 4 years ago, a client of a community housing program that Leonard Poole partially funded through his property management company. Olivia's hand stilled on the notebook. He funded community housing, she said. He funded it publicly and visibly and made sure the city council members who approved his zoning variances were at the ribbon cutting, Paulette said. And then he staffed the referral process for that program with people who understood that the applicants they were processing were also a potential labor pool for his and Walsh's operation. It was very quiet. He was using the housing program to find workers, Stone said. To find vulnerable workers, Paulette said. People who needed housing assistance were, by definition, people in precarious situations. Some of those people ended up at the Ridgeline Rest, working for cash, with Walsh knowing exactly what their circumstances were because the referral had come through Poole's network. A pause. Deja Morris was in that housing program. So was a woman named Carla Reyes, who is currently undocumented, and whom Walsh threatened directly when we started making noise. 2 others on our list. Olivia thought of Deja's face when she'd said, someone in your situation should be glad for the work decision of it. The way it had not been a casual thing but a located thing, something Walsh said because he already knew exactly what her situation was before she walked in. He hunted them, Olivia said. Nobody in the room said anything for a moment. It's an accurate description, Paulette said. Does the federal inquiry cover this? Stone said. It will, Paulette said. I'm sending them the connection this afternoon. This program received federal funding, which means federal jurisdiction attaches. This is no longer a local labor matter. She paused. Deja Morris, to be willing to talk to the federal contact directly. Specific experience. The referral from the housing program, the someone in your situation language. The rate changes creates the direct link. Stone looked at Olivia. Olivia was already writing in the notebook. I'll talk to her, she said. Deja Morris lived 20 minutes from the house on Alcott Street. She worked a day shift at a dry cleaning shop and got home at 5:30, and Olivia was at her door at 5:45 with the notebook and the specific intended of someone who has something difficult to ask and is going to ask it honestly. Answered the door and looked at Olivia's face and said, what happened? Olivia told her, in all of it, the federal inquiry, the housing program connection, Poole's role in the referral network, names that had connected Deja's experience to a structure larger than a single bad employer. Listened. She stood in her own doorway and listened without interrupting, which Olivia had learned was Everlaw's way. She held things until she had the full picture, and then she responded to the picture rather than to pieces of it. When Olivia finished, Deja was quiet for a long time. He sent me to Walsh, she said finally. I thought it was. There was a woman at the housing program office, Marilyn. She was nice, and she seemed like she genuinely wanted to help. She told me the motel needed seasonal staff, and they were flexible about background. I thought she was doing me a favor. She might have believed she was, Olivia said. Ding. She might not have known what the referral was feeding into. She knew, and she told herself it was helping, Deja said. It's worse, actually. That's how those things work. She looked at Olivia. Poole built a pipeline. Housing program gets him community goodwill and political cover. Delivers workers who have no leverage. Walsh extracts money from those workers. Poole gets 40% of everything, yes, Olivia said. Everyone stayed quiet because they were afraid to lose the thing they were barely holding on to. Deja looked at the ceiling for a moment. She was 28 years old, and she had been carrying the specific weight of that phrase, someone in your situation, for 2 years. The weight of it, not just as an insult, but as a calculation, a targeting. You are lucky to be exploited. Being told that your situation was precisely the thing that made you available to be used. The federal contact need from me, she said. And Olivia said, San, the housing program referral. The date, his name, if you remember it, on, the specific language Walsh used, and when. And then whatever questions they have, she paused. We'll be there. You won't be alone in the room, Deja said. Olivia paused. If you want me to be. Deja looked at her. You're 19 years old, she said. You found some money in a motel room, and you could have kept it, and nobody would have known. And instead, you're here at my door at 5:45 on a Tuesday explaining a federal inquiry to me. Wednesday, Olivia said. Whatever. Deja shook her head slightly. Why? She said. Not the philosophical reason, the real one. Still in this. Olivia thought about it honestly, the way Deja's directness demanded. Gregory Walsh looked at me the same way he looked at all of you, she said. He saw someone who had no options, and he decided that meant he could do whatever he wanted. And when I walked out of that motel, I thought the only difference between me and the people he's still doing it to is that I was already leaving. Already lost the job. She paused. I didn't want that to be the only reason someone got to stop being afraid. Deja held her gaze for a long moment. Then she opened the door wider. Come in, she said. I need to write some things down before I forget them. The statement took 2 hours. Deja sat at Deja's kitchen table and wrote, while Deja talked to one. And they went back through the housing program. Referral. The first day at the Ridgeline Rest, early weeks, when it had seemed fine, this rate change, and the explanation Walsh had given, the second change, and the sentence that had never fully left Deja's head. All of it, carefully, and specifically, and Olivia wrote it down exactly as Deja said it, without shaping it, because Deja's own words were better than anything shaped would be. 7:30. Deja's phone rang. She looked at it and frowned. She said. Olivia looked up. Deja answered. Put it on speaker, with a look at Olivia that asked if that was okay, and Olivia nodded. Marilyn's voice was careful and strained, with the particular quality of someone who has recently been told something alarming. Someone from an attorney's office called the housing program today, asking questions about referrals to the Ridgeline Rest. Deja said, I need you to know that I didn't understand what the referrals were for. I thought it was a legitimate work opportunity. Walsh approached the program directly and said he needed reliable workers and would be flexible about background. Sound like he was doing a service. A pause. Didn't know about the wage situation. I swear to you. Deja was quiet for a moment. How many people did you refer? She said. And paused. 6 over 2 years. 6 people, Diaz said. Do you know what happened to all 6 of them? A longer pause. I knew about you. I knew you left after a few months, and I thought you'd just found something better. A pause. Starting to understand that wasn't why. No, Deja said. Wasn't why. A silence on the phone. I want to help, Marilyn said. Something I can do the files. The documentation of the referrals. The communication Walsh had with the program. I have all of that. I've been at that office for 9 years, and I keep everything. She paused. You know, this doesn't fix what happened. I know it doesn't, Deja said. Send everything to the attorney. Her name is Paulette. She looked at Olivia, who was already writing Paulette's contact information on a page of the notebook. Review her bear. I'll give you her number. After Marilyn hung up, Deja sat back in her chair and looked at the ceiling. 6 people, she said. Plus however many went to other placements through the same network, Olivia said. This is bigger than I thought. Yes. Walsh was small time, Deja said. He was just the mechanism. Pool was the system. Dija looked at Olivia. That's what you've been trying to explain to people all week. Trying to understand it myself, Olivia said, honestly. Figuring it out as I go. You're doing fine, Dija said. She said it simply, without inflection, which was how Dija gave compliments, and which Olivia had come to understand meant they were genuine. Back to the house, on Alcott Street at 9:15, and found that someone Marion, she suspected, had left a container of soup on the stove that was still warm. She ate it standing at the counter and thought about Marilyn's voice on the phone, the 9 years of files, the 6 referrals. She thought about Leonard Poole at a ribbon cutting, smiling, when shaking hands with council members being something that looked like generosity and functioned as a supply chain. How long things could run on the momentum of people being too scared to stop them. He washed the bowl and went to bed. Thursday meeting was the one that changed everything she understood about what was happening to her personally as opposed to what was happening to the case. Called by Stone. At the house on Carver's east side, Olivia arrived to find that the 12 people assembled in the main room included not just Carver and Danny and Paulette, but 7 other people find. She had not previously met men and women of various age Johanslus who had the quality, each of them, of people, accustomed to decisions rather than deliberations. Stone introduced them with the economy of someone who considered introductions a formality rather than a social exercise. Members from Knoxville, some from surrounding areas, table. All people who had been following the situation as it developed. Sat at the end of the table and felt the distinct sensation of a room organized with a purpose she hadn't been told. Stone said, I want to talk about what comes next. The case, and he paused briefly, other things. Paulette went first. The federal preliminary inquiry was moving faster than expected, which meant Walsh and Poole were both in the position of having to respond to federal information requests, which in turn meant their attorneys were fully occupied, and the labor claims would effectively be unopposed for the immediate period. She expected settlements with the workers to be offered within 30 to 60 days. She expected the federal matter to take considerably longer, but to result in something significant for both Walsh and Poole. Theodore Birch had formally cooperated and had been told to expect a grant of immunity in exchange, had sent 9 years of files. The housing program, which had been operating under a federal grant, was being reviewed by the granting agency. All 11, plus 4 additional names that had come forward, once word spread that something real was happening, had signed on with Paulette formally. Paulette finished. Stone looked at the room. The motel, he said, and Walsh is going to lose it, either in the federal process or in the civil settlements. Property will come on the market. He paused. The chapter has been discussing buying it. Olivia looked up. Not to run as a motel, Stone said. Convert it to community use. There's a nonprofit model that several other chapters have used in other cities: transitional housing, skills training, job placement. 15 rooms is enough space to house 8 to 10 people in transitional situations and run programming in the common areas. He paused. We'd need a director. Someone who understood both the operational side and the community it was meant to serve. He looked at Olivia, back at him. That's not... She started. You're 19, he said. I know you don't have a GED. You've been homeless for 8 months, and you've been sleeping in an apartment we provided for 2 weeks. He said it plainly, without apology. I'm not asking you to run it tomorrow. I'm asking you whether the next few years, as you build the credentials and the experience, it's something you'd want to work toward. The room was quiet. She understood what he was doing. He's not offering her charity wrapped in a job title. He's looking at what she had actually done over the past 10 days. The 11 names, the notebooks, the conversations with Karen and Dija and Marilyn, the timeline for Paulette, the instinct for what information was load-bearing, and he was saying, this is a skill set. This is a real thing. We can build on this. She said, why would the chapter trust me with something like that? The people, she hadn't met a woman across the table. Maybe 50. who had the quality of someone very comfortable with her own authority, said, "Everyone, because we watched you work this week." Olivia looked at her. "I'm Rita," the woman said. "I run the chapter's nonprofit operations out of Nashville. We have 2 transitional housing programs and a job training partnership with a community college." She paused. "I've been watching what you've been doing here. The way you talked to Karen Delacroix, you handled Deja Morris. The way you sat in Paulette's office and identified the load-bearing information in Birch's files on your 3rd time reviewing them." She paused again. "You're not untrained. You're uncredentialed. Those are different problems." Yeah, held the word uncredentialed in her mind. It sat differently from the solvable problem. "A JED is 8 weeks," Rita said. "Relationship with Tennessee College of Applied Technology, practical coursework, community development, nonprofit management. Some of it online, some in person. There are stipends for people in transitional housing situations." She looked at Olivia directly. "It would cover the costs while you work with my office part-time and learn what we do." Olivia looked at Stone. Stone said nothing. This was deliberate. She could see it was deliberate. He was letting the room make the case, so she couldn't dismiss it as one person's sentiment. "Why me?" she said to Rita. "Because you already know what it feels like to be the person the program is supposed to help," Rita said. "One. And you didn't let that knowledge make you bitter or small. You used it to see other people clearly." She paused. "It's not something I can teach. I can teach everything else." And waited. Olivia thought about the envelope and went still. She thought about the 4 minutes in room 7 with $18,000 in her hands and the arithmetic of rent and food and a working zipper running through her head. She thought about the questions she'd asked herself in that room. Who are you when nobody's watching? And the answer she'd chosen. She had not known in that moment that the answer would compound, and that the choice of who she was in private would determine who she became in public. Turning an envelope to a stranger would put her in a room with 12 people 2 weeks later, being asked to build something she had not known, but she was here. "Okay," she said. Stone said. "Okay," she said again. "I'll do the GD work with Rita's office. I'll learn what I need to learn." She paused. "I want to be clear about something." The room watched her. "Asked her to do this. If eventually there's a program running out of that building, it's going to be designed for people in the specific situation I was in. Not a general transitional program, specifically for people who are aging out of foster care, or who've lost their last family member and fallen through the cracks, or who are working off the books for people like Gregory Walsh, because they have no documented history that would let them access anything else." She looked at Stone. "People don't need general assistance. They need someone who speaks their specific language." Held her gaze. "Yes," he said, "that's the idea." Something moved through the room, not quite applause, nothing that theatrical, quieter and more real. The specific atmosphere of a group of people recognizing that something has just been decided well. Agents came for Gregory Walsh on a Friday, which nobody had planned for a Friday, but which happened on a Friday, because that was when the warrant was ready. And warrants didn't wait for convenient narrative timing. Texted Stone, who was eating lunch at the long table with Danny and Olivia and 2 people from the Nashville chapter. He read the text and put his phone down. "Walsh," he said. Everyone at the table went still. "Federal warrant executed this morning." He looked at the phone again. "Is it at the motel? They took him from the front desk." Silence. "Poole?" Danny said. "Poole's attorney has been in contact with the federal office since Tuesday," Stone said, cooperating. A pause, which means he's trying to separate himself from Walsh and shift the primary exposure. "You do that?" Olivia said. "His attorney thinks so," Stone said. "Barlett thinks otherwise." He paused. "We'll see." The lunch table had gone quiet, in the specific way of people absorbing news that has been expected, but still lands with weight when it arrives. Thought about Gregory Walsh at the front desk of the Ridgeline Rest on a Friday morning, the ordinary activity of it, the way the day would have started like any other day, and then the moment it didn't. He thought about what his face would have done. None. whether he'd been angry or scared or something more complicated. So the woman with the blue Corolla and the daughter, in second grade, who had opened a door when she didn't have to. Deja, who had kept the sentence about her situation for 2 years and was now putting it in a federal statement where it would matter. Tran, with the dialysis schedule. Robert Gaines, with the lint on his shirt. She thought about all of them. And she thought they're going to hear about this today. Through the particular network of calls and texts that had formed over the past 2 weeks, was going to hear that the thing they had been afraid of confronting had been confronted and that the process was moving. She thought about what that felt like. She knew what it felt like because she had spent 8 months in a state of suspended powerlessness, and she knew the specific weight of something being wrong and having no mechanism to address it. She thought about what it felt like when that weight lifted. She got her phone out and texted, "Karen, Walsh was arrested this morning. You're going to hear about this officially through Paulette. Just wanted you to hear it from me first." Karen replied in 40 seconds, "Are you serious?" A pause, then another pause. "Does Sheila know?" And then, without waiting, "I'm calling Sheila." Olivia put the phone down. Stone was watching her. "He told Karen first," he said. "She opened her door," Olivia said. "She deserved to know first." Stone was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes." "That night in the motel room, on the floor, with me, keeping me talking." He looked at her steadily. "You talked about your grandmother, about not having a place to sleep." Barely coherent. "But I remember that." A pause. "Scared?" She thought about it honestly. "Not for myself," she said. "Scared you were going before to die on the floor the ambulance got there. Scared the 911 operator was going to put me on hold." She paused. "Wasn't scared for me specifically." "Why not?" She thought about how to say it. "Because at that point, I had already lost most of the things that fear protects," she said. "Didn't have a home or a family or a job or a future I could see clearly. The usual architecture of fear is built on protecting things you have. Didn't have enough to build that architecture." A pause. "The weird thing about losing everything is that it makes you very calm in emergencies." He looked at her for a long moment. "That's the saddest thing I've heard in a while," he said. She said, "I'm working on rebuilding the architecture," he said. He said it the same way he'd said it about the eggs. Simple, and meaning considerably more. The call that nobody had expected came Saturday afternoon. Paulette, and she called Stone, and this time he did not put it on speaker. He listened for 4 minutes, his face doing almost nothing, which meant the information was significant. When he hung up, he was quiet for a moment, and the particular quality of his silence made everyone in the room wait. "Poole," he said. His attorney just provided the federal office with the names of 2 city council members who received direct payments in connection with the zoning variances. He paused. "Consulting fees, not campaign contributions, direct payments." "Room processed this." "That's bribery," Danny said. "It's bribery," Stone confirmed. "Which means," Olivia said carefully, "the city council connections that got Poole's variances through those people are now part of a federal bribery investigation." "Yes. And Poole gave them up," she said. "Poole gave them up to buy himself a cooperation deal that separates him from the primary federal exposure," Stone said. "From his position, the smart move." He paused. "So means this is significantly larger than a labor dispute at a motel in Knoxville." Olivia held the scope of that for a moment. She thought about the morning she'd stood in room 7M7 with the envelope. The contained nature of it, one wrong thing, one choice about that one wrong thing. She had not imagined a chain. She had imagined a transaction. Money returned, wrong corrected, done. Instead, it had unspooled into something that kept reaching further, kept connecting to other things, kept finding the hidden load-bearing elements of a system that had been running on the assumption of silence. She had not planned this. She had not been strategic. She had made one honest choice in a motel room, and then made another one at Gregory Walsh's motel entrance, and then made another one at Karen's door, and another one at Deja's kitchen table, and each choice had simply led to the next available, honest choice, and together they had built something she had not designed. This change what happens to the workers, she said. 11 people. The settlements. It might speed them up, Stone said. One, Walsh and Poole both want their exposure managed before the bribery piece becomes public. Laying the labor claims quickly and completely is part of how they try to present themselves as making things right. A pause. It's infuriating. But it means Karen Delacroix and Sheila Tran and Deja Morris get their money faster, Olivia said. Okay, whatever gets them the money fastest, she said. Of it, what happens to Walsh and Poole, that's for the federal process. Money for those people is real. And it's now, and they need it now. Studied her. When did you get pragmatic? I've always been pragmatic, she said. Homeless. You have to be pragmatic. You're not homeless, Stone said quietly. Once she looked at him. You have an apartment, he said. You have a plan. He paused. You're not homeless anymore. She held that. It was such a simple sentence, factually accurate, simply stated, nothing performed about it, and went still. And yet, it sat in the room with a weight that was disproportionate to its length, and she felt it land somewhere in her chest where things were still in the process of rebuilding. You're not homeless anymore, she said. She said it the way you say a thing that is new and true, and you are testing whether it sounds like it belongs in the world. Brianna came on Sunday. Stone had told Olivia she was coming, and had told Brianna about Olivia, and the meeting had therefore been anticipated by both of them in the specific way of two people who know they share an important reference point and are uncertain what they are to each other beyond that. Brianna was 22, with dark hair and careful eyes, and the particular quality of someone who had been through something serious and was currently in the relatively fragile state of being on the other side of it, and arrived at the house on Carver's east side in a car driven by a woman named Helen, who left diplomatically. After making sure Brianna was settled, Stone introduced them simply. Olivia, this is Brianna. This is Olivia. Brianna looked at her. You returned the money, she said. That money was for me, Brianna said, not accusatory. It's locating the fact between them. I know, Olivia said. Stone told me. Brianna was quiet for a moment. When he was in the hospital, when I found out, I was scared it was gone. He had it with him, and it was just, she stopped. And then he called me and said someone found it and gave it back, and I thought, she stopped again. The kind of person does that. Someone who had a grandmother who was very clear about certain things, Olivia said, looked at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, laughed, short and genuine. Then, caught by surprise. That's the whole answer? That's the whole answer. Your grandmother would have kept it, Brianna said. Mine would have haunted me if I had, Olivia said. Tadich across the room, with each other across the room, particular awareness of two young women who had both been through things that most people their age hadn't, who both carried the specific knowledge of what it felt like to have the ground removed and to have to figure out how to stand without it. You, Brianna said, for real, not just for the money. She paused, staying with him. He told me you talked him through it, kept him focused. I talked about motorcycles, Olivia said. He talked. I just kept him going. He said you kept him going, Brianna said. He looked at Stone, who was watching them both, with the expression of a man witnessing something he had hoped for. He says you do that, she said, for people. Opened her mouth to deflect, and then stopped because deflecting was something she was trying to practice less, and because Brianna had said it plainly, and meant it plainly, and deserved a plain response. Learning, she said. Brianna nodded like that was enough, said. From the corner, are either of you hungry? We both looked at him. There's food, he said. Carver's cousin brought something earlier. It was such an ordinary thing to say, the most ordinary possible redirect. One. And yet the ordinariness of it, food, the table, the fact of being in a room together where someone was asking if you were hungry landed on Olivia with a weight she felt in her sternum. It was what family felt like. Not the legal version, not the institutional version, some version, the accumulation of shared experience, people who had been through something together and had come out still in the same room, still at the same table, still asking about food because that was what you asked when you cared whether someone had eaten. Forgotten. This was a thing that existed. She was remembering it now. Yes, she said. I'm hungry. Stone stood. He moved toward the kitchen with his careful deliberateness. And followed. Con. Olivia sat for one more moment at the long table with her hand flat on the notebook full of names and dates and load-bearing information. And she felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years settle into place in her chest like a key turning in a lock. She'd gone first. And the rest had followed. She got up and followed them into the kitchen, where something was warm on the stove and the light was ordinary and good. And she had nowhere else in the world she needed to be. 5. What honest choices build? The G test was on a Tuesday in February. 3 months after the night, Olivia had sat on the floor of room 7 with $18,000 in her hands. She didn't tell anyone she had scheduled it. Not Stone, not Danny, Rita, not Anna, not Brianna. Had moved into a small apartment 40 minutes away and called Olivia on Sunday evenings with the regularity of someone practicing a habit they intended to keep. Had studied at the kitchen table on Alcott Street every night for 6 weeks with materials Rita had sourced from the community college and a used textbook she'd bought for $3 at the library sale. On the math section 3 times. Because math was the one place her confidence still had a crack in it. Not because she was bad at it, but because nobody had told her she was good at it for long enough that she trusted the assessment. She sat in a room with 11 other adults and took the test in 4 hours and walked out into a February afternoon that was cold and sharp and indifferent to what had just happened. She got the results digitally 4 days later. She passed everything. Math section she had scored in the 89th percentile. She sat with her phone in her hand for a long moment. She texted Stone, I passed. His response came in 40 seconds. Of course you did. Put the phone down and looked at the ceiling and let herself feel it, the clean, uncomplicated satisfaction of a thing accomplished, the kind that didn't require anyone else's validation to be real. She had studied because she needed the credential. Passed because she had done the work. The math of it was simple and complete and hers. Then she texted Rita, Anna, Zonderson, and Karen, and Deja in that order. Some sent back 6 exclamation points and a voice memo of Maisie shrieking with excitement in the background, which made Olivia laugh at her kitchen table alone on a Thursday afternoon and which she replayed twice. Came to Knoxville the following week with a folder of enrollment paperwork for the Tennessee College of Applied Technology and the specific purposeful energy of someone who had been waiting for a trigger event. They sat at a long table at Carver's house, which had become the default meeting location for anything that required more than 2 people and a phone call. And Rita walked Olivia through the program: community development, nonprofit management, grant writing fundamentals, program evaluation, years of coursework. 2 years of course, a significant portion of it applicable to real work she was already doing with Rita's Nashville office on a part-time basis. The stipend was modest but real. The credential at the end was recognized. The date is March 15th, Rita said. That gives you 3 weeks. Ready, Olivia said. I know you will. Rita paused. Something else I want to talk to you about. Olivia waited. The Ridgeline Rest, Rita said. The purchase is moving faster than we expected. Walsh accepted the settlement terms from Paulette's clients last month, you know this, and part of the civil agreement included a forced sale of the property at assessed value to satisfy the judgment. Chapter submitted a bid. She paused. It was accepted. Was very still. The chapter owns the Ridgeline Rest, she said. As of last Friday, Rita said. Contractors go in next month for the conversion. 15 rooms, reconfigured. It went 8 transitional housing units in room. A common room, a small classroom space, and a dedicated office. Then she looked at Olivia. He wants you to name it. Olivia looked at her. Name it? Whatever we call it is what it'll be called on the grant applications, on the signage in the community. It matters. Rita paused. You know who this program is for better than anyone at this table. Still, you should name it. Olivia thought about the residents this program would serve, the specific people, the specific situation. Ones aging out of foster care with nowhere to go. The ones who had lost their last family member and slipped through every administrative gap simultaneously. The ones working off the books for people like Gregory Walsh because they had no documented history that would qualify them for anything else. People who had been invisible for so long that invisibility had started to feel like their natural state. She thought about the night she'd found the envelope. She thought about the questions she'd asked herself. Alone in that room, not who are you in public, not who do you want people to think you are. The harder one, the one that only gets answered in private. Choice, she said. Rita looked at her. Because everyone in that situation feels like they're out of choices, Olivia said. But they made a first choice to keep going, to survive one more day, to not disappear entirely. That's a choice. It doesn't feel like one when you're in it, but it is. She paused, for them to know that the choice they already made was enough to get them here. It was quiet for a moment. Then she wrote it down. The thing with Walsh's sentencing happened in March, 2 weeks after Olivia started her coursework, and it happened faster than Paulette had predicted because Walsh's attorney had negotiated aggressively in exchange for full cooperation on the pool-related federal charges. Walsh was sentenced to 4 years with eligibility for early release in order to pay restitution to the 14 workers, the original 11 plus 3 additional who had come forward after the settlement announcement. Restitution numbers were not large by the standards of legal proceedings, very large by the standards of the people receiving them. Delacroix's share was $11,000, representing the underpayment across 14 months and the wrongful termination Paulette had documented. Found out from Karen directly the day morning, on a Saturday, when Karen called her and said, when Maisie needs braces, putting it off for a year. I'm calling the orthodontist on Monday. When Olivia sat on her kitchen floor, she had started to do this less. Some conversations fees and still felt like they needed the grounding. And listen to Karen talk about the orthodontist appointment and the braces and how Maisie had asked if they could celebrate. Karen had said yes, and they were going to the good pizza place, the one with the individual pizzas where you could choose your own toppings. Come, Karen said, to the pizza place. Olivia had a study session scheduled that afternoon. She rescheduled it once. The pizza place was loud and bright, and Maisie chose pineapple and Canadian bacon with the conviction of someone who had thought about this for a long time and was not interested in compromise. Dolores, his mother-in-law, sighed, slice, and said it was better than she expected, which was Dolores's highest register of praise. Stayed for 2 hours. Maisie showed Olivia a drawing she had made at school of what she wanted her teeth to look like after the braces, which involved teeth that were improbably large and also sparkly. When Olivia said they looked exactly right, which made Maisie laugh so hard she got hiccups. On the bus home, Olivia texted Stone, Karen took me to the pizza place. He texted back, how was it? Maisie got pineapple on her pizza. Pause. Then bold choice. She's 7, Olivia texted. She's allowed. Leonard Poole's situation resolved in April, and it resolved publicly. Cooperation agreement with the federal office had bought him a reduced sentence, 18 months, but it had not bought him invisibility, which was the thing he had valued most, was in the federal filing. When his name was in the news coverage, which was more extensive than either his attorneys or Poole himself had anticipated. Because the connection between the housing program, the labor exploitation, and the city council bribery was exactly the kind of story that moved from local news to regional and then briefly national, the kind that got forwarded and discussed because it illustrated something people already suspected about how certain kinds of power worked. The 2 city council members who had received direct payments both resigned. One of them had been on the council for 9 years. When program was restructured under new management. With federal oversight, the referral coordinator, who had sent 6 workers to the Ridgeline Rest, believing she was helping them, kept her position. She had cooperated fully, and the review determined she had been a conduit rather than a participant. She reached out to Olivia after the coverage. When Olivia met her for coffee at a diner near the housing program office, and they had a conversation that was uncomfortable and honest, and ended with Marilyn saying, "You should have paid closer attention to where the referrals were going." And see, yes, Olivia said, "You should have. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not the one to forgive." Olivia said, "The people you referred are, and some of them might. But that's their process, not mine." She paused. "I want to know is what you're going to do differently." Lynn looked at her. "I've already changed the follow-up protocol," she said. "The referral now gets a check-in call at 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Employment terms are documented before the referral is made. Cash-only placements, good," Olivia said. "I've also," Marilyn stopped, "about what you're building. The first choice program." You waited. "I want to refer people to it," Marilyn said, "when it's open. If you'll accept referrals from us." Olivia looked at her for a moment. "Send me your new protocols," she said. "View them. If the documentation is what you say it is, yes." Marilyn nodded. She looked like someone who had been carrying something for a while and had just found a place to set it down. "Not fully, but partially." "Not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "Someone angrier, maybe." "I'm angry," Olivia said. "Just don't find it useful to be angry at you, specifically." "Wrong. You know you were wrong, and you're changing the protocol. It's what matters going forward." She paused. "The people I stay angry on behalf of are the ones who can't advocate for themselves. You can advocate for yourself. You don't need my anger." Lynn looked at her for a long moment. "How old are you?" she said. Olivia said, 20 in June. Marilyn shook her head slightly, not dismissively, but with the particular wonder of someone recalibrating. She said, "Tick." The twist that nobody had anticipated, including Stone, who had been the hardest person to surprise in any room he occupied, came in late April, from a direction so unexpected that it took everyone a moment to understand what they were hearing. Elias, Deja Morris had been going through the federal disclosure documents available through Pauletta's office, the ones made public as part of the proceeding, doing on her own time. She was doing this on her own time, out of her own interest, with the focused attention of someone who had decided to understand completely the system that had targeted her. Olivia had come to understand, someone who processed injury by mapping it, by tracing every line of the thing that had hurt her until she understood it fully enough that it had no more hidden angles. She called Olivia on a Wednesday evening. "I found something," she said, "in the disclosures. In the housing program financial records. Came out in the federal filing." A pause. "Wasn't the only outside funder. There was a second investor in the housing program, someone who contributed startup capital 4 years ago and maintained a small board position." Olivia waited. "The name on the filing," Deja said, "is Patricia Bennett." Hit Olivia like a door swinging open in a room she had thought was solid wall. "Her name, Deja," she said carefully. "What was the full name?" "Patricia Ann Bennett. She's listed as a contributing board member. Her contact address is a law firm in Nashville." Olivia sat down on the kitchen floor without deciding to. Patricia Bennett was her father's sister, her aunt. The one family member on her father's side she had never met, had known existed only because her grandmother had mentioned her once in the context of explaining why some family branches grow away from each other. She had been 22 when Olivia was born. Olivia was doing the math, 39 now. She'd been on the board of the housing program that had fed workers to Gregory Walsh's motel. Deja said, "Are you there?" "Yes." Her voice sounded like someone else's voice. "Didn't know if I should tell you. I thought about it for a day. You told me to always say the thing that needed saying. So," a pause. "Telling you." "Thank you," Olivia said. She sat on the kitchen floor for a long time after Deja hung up. Patricia Ann Bennett, a law firm in Nashville. A board position she may or may not have understood the full implications of. A name that was also Olivia's name and had therefore been in the periphery of her whole life without her ever encountering it directly. She did not know what this meant. She did not know if it meant anything at all, and went still. What she knew was that she had made a practice of doing the honest thing when the honest thing was available. And the honest thing here was to find out the truth before she decided what the truth meant. She texted Rita, who was in Nashville and knew the legal community there, and asked if the name Patricia Bennett at a Nashville law firm was familiar. Called back in 8 minutes. Ethan. Bennett Crawford, and Hale said, it's on law and estate planning. She's been a partner there for 6 years. A pause. You know her? No, Olivia said. She might know of me. Rita said, with the specific caution of someone choosing their words carefully. What's going on? She's my father's sister, Olivia said. A silence on the line. She was on the housing program board, Olivia said. It's in the federal disclosures. I know, Rita said. The disclosures. A pause. I didn't make the connection to you. You didn't either until Deja found it. Rita was quiet for a moment. What do you want to do? Olivia thought about it on the floor of her kitchen, which she would have to stop using as her thinking location now that she had chairs, but not yet. She thought about what she wanted and what was reasonable to want and what the honest assessment of the situation actually was. To know if she knew me, Olivia said, if she knew about me, she knew I existed and chose not to. She stopped. I want to know if it was a choice or if it was a gap. The difference, Rita said. Yes, Olivia said. Do you want me to make contact? Rita said. Reach out. Professionally. Attorney to attorney. Ask for a conversation. It doesn't have to be. No, Olivia said. I'll do it. She wrote the email herself. She wrote it 6 times. The version was too long. The second was too formal. The third accidentally contained language that was more accusatory than she intended. The fourth was too conciliatory. The fifth was too sparse. The 6th version was 2 paragraphs. She read it twice, decided it said what needed to be said without saying more than was known, and sent it before she could revise it again. The email said, my name is Olivia Bennett. I believe you are my father's sister. When I came across your name in connection with a matter I've been involved with in Knoxville, not writing to make any demands or claims. I'm writing because I think honesty is the right place to start, and I'd like to know whether you've known I exist. She sent it on a Thursday night. The reply came Friday morning before she had finished her coffee. 3 sentences. I have known you exist since before you were born. You've made choices I am ashamed of. If you're willing to speak with me, I will answer any question you ask. Yeah, read it 3 times. Then she called Stone. She told him about Deja's discovery, about the federal disclosures, about the email and the reply. She told him in the order it had happened without editorializing, because Stone responded best to sequence rather than summary, and because she needed to say it in order herself to understand what she actually felt about it. When she finished, Stone was quiet for a moment. What do you want? He said. Not what do you think you should do. Not what do you think this means. I want to talk to her, Olivia said. I want to hear her explain it in her own words. And then I want to decide how I feel about it. Good order, he said. I'm scared, she said. It came out before she had decided to say it, which was how the true things tended to arrive. Stone said. What if she has a good reason, Olivia said. What if she had a reason that I can't argue with, and then I have to figure out how to feel about losing 3 years I didn't have to lose? Then you figure it out, Stone said. You're not the same person you were 3 years ago. You built a different life on the other side of those 3 years. It doesn't go away. It's still 3 years. Yes, he said. He didn't try to make that smaller. She appreciated it. You come with me, she said, to Nashville. When I meet her, he paused. Not into the room, she said quickly. I need to do that part myself. I'll drive you, he said. Patricia Bennett was 40 years old with Olivia's father's eyes, which meant, by extension, Olivia's eyes, which was the first thing Olivia registered when they met, which landed somewhere in her chest with a quiet, seismic force. They met at a coffee shop Rita had recommended. Neutral ground. Patricia arrived 5 minutes early, which Olivia took as a sign of something. Put together, in the particular way of a woman who has learned to use composure as armor, and the composure was visibly costing her something today. He looked at Olivia and said, "You look like your father," Olivia said. They sat down, Patricia told her. She told her all of it, predict and complete way that Olivia had asked for in the email, and that Patricia, to her credit, prepared for. On. from Olivia's father when Olivia was 2, a falling out over their parents' estate that had become bitter enough that neither of them had spoken for years. The knowledge that Olivia existed, received through family mutual contacts. The death of Olivia's parents, which Patricia had heard about. The decision, the one she was ashamed of, to stay distant, because re-entering meant confronting estrangement and the years she'd let pass and the compounding complexity of arriving in a child's life after years of deliberate absence. Myself, you were being cared for, Patricia said. The foster system. I told myself this system was handling it, and my arriving was more about my own guilt than about your actual needs. Is that true? Olivia said. Patricia looked at her steadily. Partially true, she said, which is the same as mostly a lie I told myself. Olivia held that. The housing program, she said. Patricia's jaw tightened slightly. I joined the board because I wanted to do something that felt useful and local. Know about Poole's connection to Walsh. I didn't know about the labor situation. When the federal inquiry started and Poole's involvement became clear, she stopped. When I should have looked more carefully before I lent my name to something, Olivia said. I know. 2 of the people exploited through that program's referrals are people I know personally, Olivia said. One of them has a record that Walsh specifically used to keep her compliant. Them is undocumented and was threatened. She paused. Not abstractions. I know that now, Patricia said. I need you to know it, not because I'm punishing you, Olivia said. If there's going to be anything between us, any kind of real conversation, it has to start with all the truth on the table. Not a version of it. Patricia was quiet for a moment. She said, did you look for me? Olivia said. In the system. When you heard about my parents. Patricia looked at the table between them. Picked up the foster placement file. She said. Once, 3 years ago, Olivia waited. I didn't make contact, Patricia said. The file. I told myself you were placed well and stable, and that showing up would disrupt that. She looked up. 14. You'd already lost your parents. I convinced myself that a stranger arriving wasn't what you needed. It was removed from that placement at 16, Olivia said. Homeless at 19. Patricia's face did something that she did not try to control, which Olivia respected. That now, Patricia said. I'm not telling you so you'll feel worse, Olivia said. I'm telling you. Because the version of the story where I was stable and didn't need you was a story you told yourself, and I want you to know what the actual story was. So that if we go forward from here, we're going forward from the same facts. Patricia was very still. Do you want to go forward from here? She said. Olivia thought about what she wanted. The real answer, not the managed one. She'd been practicing this, finding the real answer rather than gotten the safe answer. And she had gotten better at, though it was still uncomfortable in the way that honest things were often uncomfortable. No yet, she said. I think you're someone I could learn to trust. I don't know that. I only know what you've told me today, and people can tell a good truth in one conversation. She paused. What I know is that I'm willing to find out. Patricia nodded. It's more than I deserve, she said. Maybe, Olivia said. I'm not keeping score. And went still. Stone was in the parking lot when she came out, leaning against the car with his arms folded, and he looked at her face when she came through the door and read it with the accuracy she had come to expect from him. I think so, she said. It's complicated. Most things worth anything are. She stood beside him and looked at the Nashville street, the ordinary afternoon of it, people moving through their lives. She had my father's eyes, she said. Stone was quiet. Which means I have her eyes, she said. Which means I've been looking through her eyes my whole life without knowing it. She paused. Strange thing to sit with. Yes, he said. She's going to reach out to Paulette about the housing program, Olivia said. She wants to provide additional documentations about Poole's involvement from the board perspective. It won't change her legal situation. She was a passive board member. She's not in legal jeopardy, but she said she wants the record to be complete. Something, Stone said. It's a start, Olivia said. He told her I'd call her next week. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Then he opened the passenger door, which was such a simple, ordinary gesture that it almost undid her. And she got in one, and he got in on the other side one, and they drove back toward Knoxville in the early evening light. 20 minutes of easy quiet, Stone said, "Are you okay?" Honestly, about it the way she thought about everything, precisely, without decoration. "Ben, I think I'm more okay than I've ever been," she said, which is a strange thing to say after the kind of day that was. But things being complicated doesn't mean they're bad. It just means they're real. Stone drove. "She might be someone I could have in my life," Olivia said. "I'm not saying she is. I'm saying she might be." A pause. Months ago, the list of people in my life was 0. Now she stopped counting internally, and the counting itself was the thing that moved something in her chest. "It's more than 0. Considerably more," Stone said. The choice program opened on a Saturday in May. Still, had the bones of what it had been, the L-shaped layout, the 14 doors, the asphalt lot, but what was inside those bones was entirely different. The common room had furniture that was real and comfortable, the kind that said, "You are a person, not a case." The classroom had a whiteboard and a round table, because round tables meant nobody sat at the head. The 8 transitional units had actual locks. Each resident had the only key to theirs, which Olivia had specified in the design meeting with the contractors as a non-negotiable, because having a space that was only yours was not a luxury for people in this situation. It was the precondition for everything else. 3 people came to the opening. When Stone was there, and Danny, Karen with Maisie and Dolores, and Sheila Tran, Deja Morris, Gaines, and Spikas had gotten a new job at a community center. 3 months after Gregory Walsh fired him, and who had been quietly following the whole arc of the story with the attention of someone who was figuring out what kind of person he wanted to be and was using what he was watching as referenced material. Theodore Birch, which surprised Olivia, stood slightly apart from the crowd with the quality of a man who was not certain of his welcome and had come anyway, which she thought was probably the right instinct. Drove up from where she was building her new life. 50 miles away, in a second-hand car she had bought herself. Came in her good coat and looked at the building with the expression of someone tallying assets. His daughter came Birch's daughter. Olivia corrected herself. His name was Nicole, and who had the same assessing directness her father lacked, and who shook Olivia's hand with the grip of someone who had heard the whole story and had an opinion about it. Patricia Bennett came, which Olivia had not announced to anyone. She stood near the back of the crowd, advertising herself. And when Olivia spotted her, she held her gaze for a moment, and Patricia nodded once, and Olivia nodded back. And that was enough for now. No speeches. Olivia had decided against speeches because speeches created a stage, and a stage created distance. And the whole point of this program was the absence of distance. Instead, there was food, real food, a spread organized by Dolores, who had treated it as a personal calling. And there was noise and conversation and the sound of people who had been through things together, finding themselves in the same room on a good day. Stone found her by the wall near the hallway, where she had positioned herself to see the whole room at once. "Well," she said. They stood side by side and looked at what was in front of them. 3 people already on the intake list, she said. Aging out of foster care next month. One who lost her grandmother in February. She paused. Grandmother's situation. I thought a lot about how to handle the intake conversation for that one. You're going to handle it. "I'm going to do it myself," she said, a few times, "until I figure out the right language." She paused. You know what she needs to hear. I know it because someone needed to say it to me, and nobody did. Stone looked at her. "What does she need to hear?" he said. Quiet for a moment, looking at the room full of people she hadn't known 5 months ago, who had become the architecture of something she hadn't planned and couldn't have imagined. "Invisible isn't the same as gone," she said. "That the fact that nobody came looking doesn't mean she wasn't worth looking for." The choice she made, to keep going the one she's been making every day without thinking of it as a choice was enough. Always enough. She paused, and that the next chapter's already started. One she just hasn't read it yet. Stone was quiet. She heard him breathe. "I told you that," he said. "Nobody," she said. "That's the point." He didn't say anything for a moment. When she glanced at him, his face had the quality it got when something had moved through him that he wasn't going to perform. Maisie appeared from somewhere in the crowd and grabbed Olivia's hand with the complete confidence of a 7-year-old who has decided someone belongs to her, pulling her toward the food table because there were cookies. And Maisie had been negotiating with Dolores Delos about the cookies for 20 minutes and needed backup. Olivia let herself be pulled. Stone watched her go, and something settled in his face that was not quite the expression of a man who had expected this, but of a man who had hoped for it, which was a different and more honest thing. Deja found him by the wall 10 minutes later, standing where Olivia had been. "She's good at this," Deja said, watching Olivia across the room. Now, deep in a conversation with Robert Gaines and Karen simultaneously, one hand still occupied by Maisie, at something Robert had said. Stone said, "She's going to run this place better than anyone you could have hired," Deja said. "You knew that from the hospital," Deja said. "You knew it when she walked in with an envelope and a backpack and a notebook on a bus schedule." Stone didn't deny it. "She didn't," Deja said. "She still doesn't fully know it." "She's getting there," Stone said. Deja looked at him. "You think when she walked into your room at the hospital, when she put the envelope down?" Stone was quiet for a moment. Beside, someone had opened the main door, and the May afternoon was coming in, warm and unhurried. He said, that I had spent a very long time believing that the best people were behind me. The ones worth knowing were mostly in the past, and what was left was just getting through. He paused. He thought I was wrong about that. Deja nodded. Across the room, across the video, was listening to something Karen was saying with the focused attention she brought to people when she was genuinely interested in one, and she tilted her head slightly the way she did when she was processing. She said something that made Karen's face open into the relieved, full laugh of someone who has needed to laugh for a while. The room held them all, the 43 people who had come from different places and different stories and different kinds of surviving, and the afternoon light came through the windows they had replaced with better ones that had led to this moment, had been built from a single honest choice made by a 19-year-old girl, alone in a room where nobody was watching. She had asked herself who she was when nobody could see. She had answered. And the answer, it turned out, had been the foundation of everything. Leah Bennett had walked into the worst year of her life with nothing but her own character, and had built one from that single uncompromising thing, life that was real and full in hers, and in doing so, reminded everyone who witnessed it that a person's circumstances are not their ceiling. Keep that integrity is not a luxury of the comfortable. The most powerful thing in any room is a person who has already decided, before anyone is watching, exactly who they intend to be. "I'll wash your bikes for food." He said it to 120 Hells Angels standing in a Nevada parking lot. 18 years old, holes in his shoes, hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Every person in that lot went completely silent. Not one of them laughed. Not one of them moved, because every single one of them recognized something in that boy's eyes, something most people never have the guts to show a stranger. If you've ever had to swallow your pride just to survive, this story is going to hit you somewhere deep. Subscribe to our channel and follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The morning Ethan Miller turned 18, he sat on the edge of a stripped mattress in an apartment that no longer belonged to him and counted what he had left in the world. $43 and some change. A grandfather's mechanic cloth folded in quarters tucked into the back pocket of jeans that had been washed so many times the denim had turned the color of old smoke. And a younger sister named Lily, 14 years old, asleep in the next room because she didn't know yet that the landlord was coming at noon. Ethan sat there in the silence of early morning and did not allow himself to cry. He had learned months ago that crying used up energy he couldn't afford to waste. So he sat there instead, jaw-tight, hands flat against his knees, doing the only thing he knew how to do when the world got too heavy. He made a list. Not with paper. He didn't have any. He made it in his head the way his grandfather Raymond had taught him to think through engine problems, step by step, no panic, no skipping ahead. What do I have? What do I need? What's the first move? What he had was a mechanical mind that his grandfather had spent 12 years sharpening. What he needed was a job that would pay enough to keep Lily fed and find them somewhere to sleep before winter arrived in Nevada. What the first move was, he didn't know yet, but he was going to find one. That was the thing about Ethan Miller that most people never understood when they looked at him. When they saw the worn-out shoes, when they saw the secondhand clothes, when they saw the skinny teenager with shadows under his eyes and a face that had gotten old too fast. They thought they were seeing someone who had given up. They were wrong. They were looking at someone who had not yet found the door. 6 months before that morning, Thensbonnev had still carried the ordinary shape of a teenager's existence. High school, a part-time job at a gas station. Weekend afternoons in his grandfather Raymond's garage, lying on a creeper board under a 1967 Harley-Davidson Electroglide that Raymond had been slowly, lovingly, obsessively restoring for 11 years. Raymond Miller was the kind of man who believed that patience was a skill you had to practice every single day, the same way a musician practiced scales. He wasn't gentle about everything. He was a direct man, blunt when he needed to be, with hands that had been calloused by decades of work, and a laugh that came from somewhere deep and unself-conscious. But with motorcycles and with his grandson, he had infinite patience. You want to know the difference between someone who can fix things and someone who can't? Raymond had said one afternoon, not looking up from the carburetor he was cleaning. The garage smelled like motor oil and old coffee, and the radio in the corner was playing something country and soft that neither of them was really listening to. What? Ethan had asked. Someone who can't fix things gets frustrated when the machine doesn't cooperate. Someone who can fix things understands that the machine is just showing them where they haven't paid enough attention yet. Ethan had thought about it for a long time. He still thought about it. Anyone can destroy something, Raymond said that same afternoon, setting down the carburetor and looking at his grandson with the particular directness that meant he was about to say something he'd been carrying for a while. It takes patience and character to rebuild it. Ethan had nodded, not fully understanding what he was being told. He understood it now. Raymond had died of a heart attack 8 months before Ethan's 18th birthday, and that was when everything that had been wrong with James Miller, Ethan's father, stopped being hidden by the general noise of a family functioning. James Miller was not a bad man exactly. He was a weak one. He had debts he had never told anyone about, gambling, losses that went back years, loans from people who charged interest in ways that didn't appear in any legal document. When Raymond died and the garage was sold to cover some of those debts, James Miller looked at the life he'd built and the pile of consequences he'd accumulated and made the decision that broke Ethan's understanding of what a father was. He left. Not dramatically, not with a fight or a speech or even a letter. He was simply there one evening and not there the next morning, and the note he left on the kitchen table said only that he was sorry and that he hoped things would work out. He left behind 2 children, a month of unpaid rent, utility bills that had been ignored for longer than that, and a truck that had been repossessed 3 days later. Ethan had stood in the kitchen holding that note for a long time. Then he folded it, put it in his pocket, and gone to wake up Lily. "I need you to trust me," he told her. She was 13 then, just barely, with Raymond's same direct eyes and a stillness that was older than her age. "We're going to be okay. Okay, but I need you to trust me." She had looked at him for a moment. "Are you going to be okay?" The question had almost broken him. "Yeah," he said. "I'm going to be fine." Yeah. The months between James Miller's disappearance and Ethan's 18th birthday were the education that no school had ever given him and no school could have prepared him for. He learned that the social services system moved slowly, that emergency assistance had waiting lists, that most landlords would not rent to an 18-year-old with no credit history and no co-signer regardless of what story he told, that a teenage boy trying to take care of his younger sister occupied a particular kind of invisible space in the world, a space where people felt sorry but not quite sorry enough to do anything concrete. He learned that most doors would close politely. A few would close hard. He learned the difference between sympathy and respect, and that the second one was the only currency that actually bought anything. He worked every job he could find or invent. He cleaned parking lots at 5 in the morning for a gas station manager who paid him under the table and looked the other way. He carried boxes for a grocery warehouse 2 evenings a week. He found a neighbor on the next street whose lawnmower had been broken for 2 seasons and spent an afternoon fixing it for $20, then spent the next 3 weeks mowing that same neighbor's lawn and 2 others on the same block. He found a bicycle with a bent wheel at the edge of a junkyard and straightened it and rode it 8 miles each direction when he needed to search for work. He did not complain, not to anyone, not even to Lily, though she watched him with those steady Raymond eyes and understood more than he thought she did. The apartment he'd been managing to hold on to through sheer will and scrambled together payments finally gave out when the landlord received a formal complaint from the building management company and discovered that the lease was technically in James Miller's name and therefore non-transferable to a minor. That was 3 weeks before Ethan's birthday. He found a woman from their church who agreed to let Lily stay in her spare room temporarily. Getting Lily settled and safe had taken everything he had left emotionally and logistically. After that, Ethan slept where he could, a cousin's couch for a few nights, until the cousin's wife made clear that the arrangement wasn't working a shelter for a week, until he found that the curfew and rules made it impossible to keep the schedule he needed for the warehouse job. He kept moving. He kept making lists. He kept believing that somewhere out there was a door that would open. The morning of his birthday, he counted his $43 and some change and made his plan for the day. He would walk to the industrial district on the east side of town and try 3 more shops that he hadn't visited yet: an auto parts supplier, a metal fabrication company, and a small engine repair outfit that one of the parking lot guys had mentioned might be hiring. He would be at the first one when they opened. He would be polite and direct, and he would tell them what he could do, not what had happened to him. Because he had learned by now that stories of hardship made employers uncomfortable in a way that made them say no faster than anything else. He washed his face. He put on the cleanest version of the clothes he had. He folded Raymond's cloth and put it in his back pocket. He walked out into Nevada in July. The heat that particular summer was the kind that sits on your chest and makes breathing feel like a negotiation. By 9 in the morning, the air shimmered off the asphalt in long, slow waves, and by 11, the back of Ethan's shirt was soaked through. The auto parts supplier had no openings but took his name. The metal fabrication company had a sign on the door that said hiring, which turned out to mean hiring for a position that required 2 years of certified welding experience. The engine repair outfit was closed. Not temporarily, permanently. The windows were dark, and a sheet of paper taped to the glass gave a number to call if you were owed money. Ethan stood in front of that dark window for a long moment. I was not a person who allowed himself much self-pity. He'd made a decision very early in those months after his father left. That self-pity was a room he couldn't afford to walk into because he didn't trust himself to walk back out. But standing there at 11:30 in the morning, with his legs tired and his stomach empty, and the heat pressing down from every direction, he felt the weight of the last 8 months settle on him in a way it hadn't in a while. He breathed through it. I'm on the next plan. There was a diner about 2 miles north off Route 93 that he'd passed once on a borrowed bicycle. He'd noted it the way he noted everything useful as a potential something to file away. Diners sometimes needed dishwashers who could start immediately. Sometimes they needed someone to mop or carry or stock cash under the table, no paperwork. It was worth the walk. He started walking. He heard them before he saw them. The sound arrived from about a half-mile out, a deep, rolling, layered vibration that was less like noise and more like a change in pressure. Ethan had grown up around motorcycles, had spent enough time in Raymond's garage that his ear was tuned to engines, the way other people's ears were tuned to music. He knew that sound without needing to see its source. Harley-Davidsons, a lot of them. His first thought was not fear. His first thought was the involuntary automatic assessment that Raymond had built into him, the subtle differences in idle between engines that were tuned right and engines that were running a little rough, the particular harmony of a group of bikes whose riders had learned to idle together. He counted by ear somewhere between 80 and 120 before he rounded the bend in the road and the diner parking lot came into view. He stopped. The parking lot was full, edge to edge, front to back, row after row of motorcycles, mostly Harleys, some of them, so well maintained, they caught the midday sun and threw it back in slabs of chrome light. The riders were everywhere, sitting on their bikes, standing in groups, leaning against the diner's exterior wall. Some of them eating at the outdoor picnic tables that had been arranged along the side of the building. Black leather vests, patches on every one of them. Ethan recognized the patches the way he recognized the engine sound from Raymond, who had known more about motorcycle culture than most people knew about their own families, and had shared that knowledge the same way he shared everything, casually and completely. Hell's Angels. Not 5, not 10, not the modest-sized group that passed through Nevada towns on summer runs. This was a full chapter gathering, maybe multiple chapters. He couldn't count them all from where he stood, but the number was somewhere around 120, possibly more. Every ordinary instinct told him to cross the road, to take the long way around, to find another diner or another approach to the afternoon's problem. People who did not know motorcycles, who had grown up with newspaper stories as their only reference point, would have turned and walked fast in the other direction. Ethan stood there. He looked at the parking lot and he thought about several things very quickly. I thought about the $43 in his pocket and what it needed to cover. He thought about Lily at Mrs. Garner's house, eating whatever Mrs. Garner put on the table, not complaining, trusting him. He thought about Raymond's hands on that Electra Glide patient and certain working a problem that had no solution yet until it did. He thought about the mechanic cloth in his back pocket. I thought about what his grandfather would have said, which was not a mystical thing, not a voice from somewhere beyond, just a clear and practical thing that Raymond would have said in